Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into a different century. A place where the air smells of olive oil lamps, wet stone, and the faint sweetness of crushed pigments. Tonight we walk through the warm arteries of Florence itself, but not the Florence you know from glossy travel photos. No, this is the Florence of the 1470s, a city still shrugging off the Middle Ages while stretching, groaning, and blooming its way into something shockingly new. Before we ease into the night, I want you to do something simple. Support if you'd like, subscribe, or just drift off with me tonight. And if you feel comfortable, comment your location and the time it is for you right now. I love knowing where these sleepy journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink into a soft Florentine dawn, not a sharp sunrise, more an atmospheric wash of peach, gold, and pale blue creeping down sandstone walls. The rooftops are a mosaic of warm terracotta, still damp with the night's coolness. Somewhere far off, a baker slams a wooden paddle into his oven, and a dog barks at a cart rumbling over cobblestone. And you realize you're standing at the threshold of a workshop unlike any other, a place where a young, restless apprentice is already awake, long before the city stirs. A man whose name you know, but whose presence feels almost unreal. Leonardo da Vinci, only around your age when you first discovered his paintings, but here he is still closer to a student than a master. A tall, broad-shouldered figure with long, chestnut hair that curls at the ends, his hands already stained with charcoal dust. But for now, he hasn't seen you. He's too busy studying a bundle of feathers in one hand, as if the bird they belonged to had whispered some secret to him. You walk slowly, letting the rhythm of Florence settle you. 2 or 3 steps at a time, pausing, breathing, settling deeper into the warm cradle of the scene. The wind brushes your face as it slips between narrow alleys. Those same alleys that would one day carry secret messages between rival families, merchants, and Medici agents. But today they hold only whispers of bread ovens and new opportunities. A historical fact drifts up from memory. Florence at this exact moment was one of the richest and most intellectually explosive cities in Europe, thanks to the Medici banking empire. Their money pulled artists, engineers, humanists, and scholars like iron filings to a magnet. You can practically feel that pull now. Leonardo certainly did. You step closer to his workshop, passing a small wooden cart filled with oddly shaped rocks. You pick one up. It's heavy, with strange perforations, almost like it belonged underwater. Later you'll learn that Leonardo collected stones obsessively, trying to read the earth the way a monk reads scripture. Historians still argue whether he was merely curious or if he had already grasped the earliest hints of geological time, long before modern geology existed. The street opens into a square. Soft morning chatter floats between stone facades. Merchants are unrolling fabric dyed in brilliant crimson and dusty blue. A pair of monks crosses silently towards Santa Maria del Fiore, its great dome still new enough to make locals stare in awe each morning. Brunelleschi's architectural miracle glows with the sun's first touch. As you step into Leonardo's orbit, you feel the strange contrast of him, both quiet and intense, both gentle and explosive, both grounded and reaching beyond the sky. He leans toward a wooden table littered with sketches. They spill over the edges like leaves in a sudden gust. Studies of horses, flying creatures, water wheels, human hands, and mechanical joints that look suspiciously modern for someone living in the 15th century. Your footsteps echo softly. He looks up. His expression isn't startled. If anything, he studies you the way he studies everything, with curiosity sharpened to a razor's edge. But then he smiles, small at first, then warm. There is no ego in it, no hunger for praise, only the pleasure of sharing the world with someone who might understand its wonder. He gestures for you to come closer, and as you step inside his workshop, the atmosphere hushes around you. Ropes hang from the ceiling. A half-assembled pulley sways gently. A pot of blue pigment, ultramarine, more valuable than gold, sits like a jewel in the corner. And then something slightly strange catches your eye. A wooden model shaped like a giant walnut shell. Leonardo notices your curiosity and chuckles softly. "It will make sense," he says, in time. You want to ask what it does, but he's already moved on, fussing with a device that looks half like a weapon and half like a child's toy pulled apart. That's Leonardo. Every oddity is the beginning of something. Every scrap of wood has a destiny. He hands you a quill dipped in ink and points to a sketch showing a man with wings strapped to his arms. "Do you think," he asks softly, "that a human could learn to borrow the sky?" You want to answer, but the question isn't really for you. It's for the universe. It's for the wind weaving through Florence. It's for the birds circling high above the rooftops. A small curiosity flickers through your mind, something you once read. Leonardo was notorious for buying birds in cages just so he could set them free, watching them fly upward in spirals. People found it charming and a little odd. He watches your expression, as if guessing your thought. "There is no beauty," he whispers, "without freedom." A long silence settles over the workshop. Not awkward, not empty, just a wide, soft pause where your mind seems to slow, almost matching the rhythm of your own breathing. Through the open window, you can hear Florence, alive yet gentle. It's peaceful here, safe, like the world outside might dissolve if you drifted too deeply into this moment. Leonardo rolls up one of his sketches. "We should begin," he says, and you feel, both in your pulse and in the quiet hum of the room, that this is the first step into something vast, something that will take you through inventions, dreams, heartbreaks, flying machines, war engines, underwater suits, mechanical nights, and cities that never were. But for tonight, you're simply here, in Florence, with the man who wanted to understand everything, and the night stretches gently ahead. You step deeper into Leonardo's world, letting the wooden door ease shut behind you. The sound is soft, a gentle thump softened by hanging cloth, plaster walls, and the stacks of half-finished inventions leaning casually in every direction, as if the workshop itself is sighing with ideas. Your eyes adjust, and suddenly the space unfolds like a labyrinth. Not a dangerous one, but a storm of creativity caught mid-motion. It feels almost alive. The ceiling beams stretch above like the ribs of a ship. Leather straps dangle from hooks. A pulley creaks lazily in the draft from the window, and a set of metal tools glints quietly on a table. Chisels, gouges, compasses, dividers, and brushes arranged with a precision that feels elegant rather than strict. You take a step forward. The floor warms your feet through your shoes, the wood worn smooth by years of pacing, measuring, sketching, doubting, revising, and dreaming. Leonardo passes by you, the hem of his tunic brushing your arm. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't need to. Every gesture he makes is part of the rhythm of this place. He opens a shutter just enough to let a slice of golden light spill across the room. Dust particles swirl in the beam like tiny stars drifting through a universe he built. He gestures toward a long workbench. "This," he says softly, "is where thinking becomes doing." You approach slowly, your fingers brushing across papers with ink still drying. Some sketches show machines you recognize, gears, cranes, bridges. Others look like strange hybrids, a lion with mechanical joints, a chariot shaped like a curled shell, a wing with thin ribs that mimic bad anatomy. You pause at one drawing. It shows a figure wearing a tight suit of leather, with strangely angled limbs and an odd protrusion at the back. Before you can ask, Leonardo speaks. An attempt, he murmurs, to imitate the movement of the sea creatures. You raise an eyebrow slightly. Sea creatures? He grins and nudges the sketch aside. Not all experiments succeed, he adds, but each one whispers something useful. You wander through the workshop, letting your eyes drift across shelves brimming with oddities. Glass jars of beetle shells, feathers bound with twine, pigments in shells arranged like a painter's rainbow. Rosalina blue, saffron yellow, verdigris green. That deep, luxurious ultramarine he guarded like a treasure chest. A historical fact swirls into memory. Ultramarine was so costly that many artists could only use it sparingly, but Leonardo insisted on using it even in early works, arguing that the sky deserved nothing less than the richest pigment humans had ever created. He spent absurd amounts of money just to secure a good supply. You can't help but smile. Leonardo notices and shrugs. Beauty is expensive. Ignoring it costs more. You look over to the far corner of the workshop where something enormous looms, covered in a linen cloth. It's shaped like a cone, or maybe a tower. Whatever it is, its very presence seems to generate a soft tension in the air. You lift the edge of the cloth, and underneath is a massive wooden frame lined with curved ribs. The armored car, Leonardo says, almost embarrassed. A thought experiment, perhaps too ambitious. He scratches the back of his neck, looking younger, almost shy. Historians still argue whether Leonardo genuinely believed his armored car design would ever roll efficiently, or whether he intended it as a political showpiece, something to impress powerful patrons without necessarily being functional. Leonardo taps the wood affectionately. It teaches balance, weight, motion. Lessons travel between inventions. Your gaze slides to another table where small, hand-carved gears lie in arranged spirals. Not random, precise. Measured, aligned like the petals of a mechanical flower. You touch one gently. It's surprisingly light. Boxwood, Leonardo says. It listens better than metal. A curiosity pops in your mind. One of those stories that seems too strange to be true. Leonardo allegedly constructed a tiny automaton in the shape of a lion for King Francis I of France, designed to walk forward and open its chest to reveal lilies. No one knows exactly how it worked, and scholars disagree about whether the mechanism was simple or astonishingly complex. You mention it. Leonardo laughs. The lion. People still talk about it. His smile fades into something distant, reflective. Some inventions, he says, are meant only for a moment, like fireworks. You walk past a canvas propped against the wall. It's unfinished, just charcoal lines forming the ghost of a figure. The face is serene, almost familiar. Is it? Leonardo rushes forward, suddenly animated, pulling the canvas upright. Study for a portrait, he says. The features aren't ready yet. Faces require patience. Hands even more, as if to demonstrate. He takes your hand lightly, turning it palm up. He studies it for a moment with narrowed eyes. You hold your breath when you're curious, he whispers. You didn't even realize you were. You exhale slowly. He walks away again, leaving you in the middle of the workshop, overwhelmed by the gentle storm of invention around you. The workshop feels like an orchestra warming up, every object humming a different note. Brushes soaking in oil, feathers rustling in a half-open crate, metal tools ticking softly when disturbed, a rope creaking from the ceiling beam, and somewhere under it all, Leonardo's mind pulsing, invisible but unmistakable. He moves constantly from station to station with no clear sequence, touching this model, adjusting that screw, sketching a quick curve on a scrap of parchment, then pivoting instantly to a jar of swirling blue pigment. It should feel chaotic, but somehow, it feels like gentle order, like the tides, like heartbeats. You stop at a strange contraption near the window, a wooden wheel with compartments filled with stones. Leonardo notices your interest. A perpetual motion experiment, he says softly. A dream, or a folly. He shrugs. But if we don't chase the wind, how will we ever touch it? The light dims again as a cloud drifts past the sun. The workshop feels even more intimate now, shadows stretching across the tables like sleeping animals. You take a deep breath, the scent of linseed oil grounding you. Your eyelids lower a little, not from boredom, from the slow, hypnotic rhythm of the room. Outside, Florence begins to wake fully. Voices drift upward, clattering carts, market cries, church bells with long, lingering tones. Inside, Leonardo's world remains quiet, focused, suspended. A peaceful cocoon of gears, feathers, pigments, dreams, and you. Somewhere in this room lies the seed of every invention he would ever create. The flying machines, the war engines, the musical instruments, the water pumps, the underwater gear, the city plans, the robot knight. All of them start here. All of them start now. In the workshop of endless experiments. Leonardo moves past you with the same quiet energy as before, but there's something different in his posture now. He looks as if he's already halfway inside a thought, one so large and intricate that it might spill from his hands if he doesn't catch it quickly. He picks up a small notebook bound in rough leather and gestures for you to follow him to the doorway. The workshop is wonderful, yes, but it's only one half of Leonardo's mind. The other half lives outside, in the world itself. Come, he says softly. To understand anything, you must first learn to look. You step into the Florentine street again. The morning has warmed, and the city glows in honey-colored light. A cat darts between crates. A pair of women gossip as they shake out linens. A group of apprentices haul wooden boards toward a construction site, calling out to one another in rhythmic shouts. Leonardo doesn't walk like other people. Where they stride, he drifts. Where they glance, he gazes. Where they hurry, he slows, until the world reveals something subtle, something overlooked. He kneels suddenly beside a puddle left from the night's cleaning. The surface reflects the dome of the cathedral, warping it gently. He studies it, tilts his head, then sketches a few lines in his notebook. Water, he says, almost in a whisper. It tells stories more honestly than men. You step beside him. The puddle is nothing special to you, just thin, dirty water shimmering slightly under a sunbeam. But Leonardo sees the angle of reflection, the curvature of light, the rippling distortion caused by a breeze you barely felt. He stands and leads you to a stone bench near the edge of the square. There, he watches a flock of birds rise suddenly from a rooftop, spiraling upward in a loose funnel. His eyes narrow, his breath slows, and you can feel him thinking, not in words, but in shapes. Do you notice, he asks quietly, how the outer birds fly differently from the inner ones? You nod, even if you're not sure you really saw anything at all. He sketches again. Quick strokes, wing angles, curves of lift, little notes in mirrored writing. A historical fact surfaces in your mind. Leonardo filled thousands of pages with observations of birds, water, shadows, human expressions, and moving bodies, often more like a scientist than an artist. His notebooks were not just drawings. They were experiments, hypotheses, and analyses wrapped in ink. You watch the birds disappear into the sky, and you feel a softness settle inside you, as if the scene itself is slowing your heartbeat. Leonardo closes his notebook. Observation, he says, is the first science. He gestures toward a nearby wall where vines creep upward. The leaves flutter faintly. A small, striped lizard clings to the stones, blending seamlessly with the shifting patches of shade. Leonardo crouches again, fascinated. Look at the shadow, he murmurs. It is sharper in the morning, softer in the afternoon. Every hour tells a different truth. You tilt your head, trying to see what he sees. And slowly you begin to. The lizard's shadow is long and thin, cast at an angle you hadn't noticed before. As a cloud passes, the shadow blurs, dissolves, reforms. Leonardo draws it all. Then he pauses, a faint smile forming. Do you know, he says, that some scholars claim the Earth must be much older than our histories say? The mountains themselves suggest it. This is your academic debate moment. Even centuries later, historians still argue whether Leonardo had intuitions about geological time, whether he recognized that fossils and rock layers pointed to an Earth far older than medieval chronologies allowed. You mention this uncertainty. Leonardo laughs quietly. Let them argue, he says. The Earth doesn't change its age to please men. A breeze passes. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the coolness brush lightly over your face. When you open them, Leonardo is already sketching again, this time studying the way dust rises from the feet of a passing donkey, lifting in a faint spiral. He draws the motion of the dust itself, not the donkey, not the street, just the swirl. He steps aside and offers you the notebook. The page is astonishing. Tiny marks convey motion, softness, turbulence. You didn't even realize dust had a shape until you see it diagrammed before you. Leonardo stands. People think art is about the thing, he says, but truly, it is about the seeing. He guides you toward the Arno River, the water flowing steadily under the pale morning sun. Fishermen pull at their nets. A line of laundry flaps gently in the breeze. A merchant dumps a bucket of spoiled grapes into the water, and they drift away like dark petals. Leonardo crouches at the edge, touching the surface lightly with the back of his fingers. Ripples expand from the point of contact. "Do you hear it?" he asks. You listen. At first, you hear only the usual sounds: water, voices, distant carts. But slowly, you begin to notice subtler layers. The slosh against stone, the faint crackle of pebbles tumbling underwater, the rhythmic drip from an overhanging plank. Leonardo smiles. Sound, he says, is a kind of drawing you make with your ears. You almost laugh at how strange and beautiful that idea is. But before you can respond, he stands again, shading his eyes as he looks across the river. A curiosity rises in your memory. Leonardo was sometimes seen wandering Florence with small cages, quietly releasing birds he had purchased at markets. Some say it was compassion. Others say it was research. He turns to you. Everything is connected, he says. Wings, shadows, water, dust. And somehow, it feels true. Florence hums around you, but your mind slows. Your shoulders loosen. The gentle rhythm of observation becomes a lullaby. Leonardo closes his notebook one final time. You're learning, he whispers. And as he gestures for you to follow him deeper into the city, you realize you're not just watching Leonardo observe the world. He's teaching you how to see. You follow Leonardo through a narrow corridor that opens into a quieter part of Florence. The noise of the markets fades behind you, replaced by a softer city, more whispers than shouts, more shadows than sunlight. A place where knowledge hides in corners and secrets move like smoke through alleyways. Leonardo stops beside an arched doorway leading into what looks like a small apothecary. The scent of herbs drifts out: rosemary, sage, crushed myrtle, something sharper like vinegar. Inside, a thin man in a brown apron nods at Leonardo without surprise. Perhaps they know each other. Perhaps half the city does. Leonardo gestures for you to enter. You step inside, and the room feels cooler, thicker. Glass jars line the shelves, each holding dried leaves, roots, powders, or preserved specimens floating in pale liquid. Some jars contain things you'd rather not identify. Leonardo moves with familiarity here. He picks up a mortar, grinds a few leaves, and smells them thoughtfully. Then he sets the bowl down and gestures toward a back door. This way, he murmurs. The apothecary nods once more, as if granting quiet permission. You step into a dim chamber lit only by 2 candles. The air is heavy, scented with oil, parchment, and something faintly metallic. A wooden table occupies the center, covered with parchment sheets filled with delicate lines. At first you think they're maps. Then your eyes adjust. They're bodies. Not whole bodies, but parts, arms, torsos, spines, hearts, jaws, laid out in ink with such astonishing precision that they feel alive. Leonardo places a hand on the nearest sheet. There is beauty, he whispers, in understanding how life is woven. You feel a slight chill, not of fear but of awe. These drawings are from a mind that wants to see beneath the veil of the world, beneath skin, beneath existence itself. A historical fact rises gently. Leonardo performed dozens of dissections in secret, sometimes working with doctors, sometimes alone in hospitals or crypts, studying the human form at a level unmatched for centuries. You lean closer. The line work is impossibly fine. Every muscle fiber, every tendon curve, every subtle ridge captured like a sculptor carving with ink. His handwriting surrounds the drawings in tight, mirrored script. Leonardo senses your fascination. People spend their whole lives inside their bodies, he murmurs, but never truly see them. He moves to a small chest and lifts its lid. Inside is a folded sheet of parchment. He unwraps it carefully, revealing a breathtaking anatomical study of the heart. 4 chambers, twisting vessels, a series of tiny vortices illustrating how blood might swirl with each contraction. Many believe the heart is the seat of emotion, Leonardo says, but it is also a pump, an engine of remarkable design. He hands it to you. The heart feels like a diagram and a poem at the same time. Its curves echo the arches of Florence. Its chambers feel like rooms of a cathedral. Its lines flow like rivers of motion. Leonardo watches you quietly. Do you know, he says, that some physicians still argue if the heart moves the blood or if the blood moves the heart? There's your academic debate moment. In his time, scholars disagreed fiercely about circulation, and Leonardo's insights were centuries ahead of what medicine accepted. You set the parchment down gently. Leonardo lights a third candle. The room warms slightly, and the shadows dance across the drawings. He steps toward another table and unveils something unexpected, an anatomical study of a fetus curled inside the womb, rendered with such tenderness that it feels like a prayer. You swallow softly, moved by the quiet reverence of it. Leonardo's expression deepens. Life begins in silence, he says, and ends in silence. He traces the curve of the drawing, not touching the parchment, just hovering his fingertip above it. Understanding life, he murmurs, means accepting both truths. You notice another parchment showing a series of jaws, human and animal. The comparison is deliberate. The shapes echo one another in a way that feels almost evolutionary. You look at Leonardo. He gives a faint, mischievous smile. Nature, he whispers, likes to repeat herself. This is your eccentric curiosity. Some of Leonardo's notes hint at ideas surprisingly close to proto-evolution, far earlier than Darwin, long before anyone else dared to think along those lines. Leonardo moves again, unable to stay still for long. He lifts a candle, holds it against the wall, and gestures for you to watch. You do. The flame flickers, casting a moving shadow of your hand on the wall. Leonardo guides your wrist gently. See how the tendons shift beneath the skin? He traces the movement with the tip of a charcoal stick, capturing each subtle adjustment. You feel your breath slow as he sketches. The sound of charcoal on parchment is soft, like the hush of fabric on stone. Outside, Florence fades even further. The apothecary's murmurs vanish. The street sounds dissolve. You and Leonardo exist inside a pocket of stillness carved from time. He sets the charcoal down. Your hand drawing on the parchment looks impossibly lifelike. Tendons visible beneath the skin, knuckles shaped with delicate precision. Leonardo tilts his head. The body, he says, is a machine of divine engineering. He steps back, letting the shadows reclaim the room. The flickering candlelight gives every drawing the illusion of motion. Muscles shifting subtly, hearts pulsing faintly, veins breathing in rhythm. It is both eerie and unbelievably beautiful. Leonardo closes his notebook slowly. Come, he says, his voice lower now. We have more to learn. You follow him back toward the doorway. As he opens it, light from the apothecary spills across the floor, illuminating the drawings one last time before the door closes and returns them to silence. You exhale gently. The world feels different now. Not heavier, just deeper. You understand what Leonardo understands. That seeing truth requires courage, and sometimes darkness. Leonardo leads you away from the apothecary and into a sunlit courtyard behind the building. The morning has ripened into something warm and golden, the light stretching long across the flagstones. A soft breeze brushes past your ear, carrying with it the faint aromas of bread, olives, and the sharpness of freshly planed wood. He stands in the center of the courtyard for a moment, looking upward, not at the rooftops, not at the windows, but at the sky itself. A pair of swallows darts overhead, looping and twisting in tight spirals, their wings cutting small arcs against the blue. Leonardo watches them with the intensity of someone studying a sacred text. Then he turns to you. You see only birds, he says quietly. I see instructions. You feel a tingle drift down your spine. He gestures for you to follow him toward a wooden shed tucked along the courtyard wall. Its door is partly open, and inside you glimpse something long and narrow, like the bones of a great creature waiting to be assembled. Leonardo pushes the door open fully, and the smell of sawdust, parchment, oils, and feathers floods into the courtyard. Inside, the space is cluttered with half-built wings, stacks of paper scraps, bent reeds, strings, wooden ribs, and sketches pinned to the walls. Every surface is covered with aerodynamic shapes, curves, angles, sweeping arcs that mimic the forms of birds and bats. This room is not just a workshop. It is a dream incubator. Leonardo picks up a long wooden frame shaped like a wing. It's delicate, elegant, almost too light for its size. The secret, he murmurs, is understanding why the sky accepts some creatures and rejects others. He guides your hand to the frame. It feels smooth, polished with care. The ribs bend slightly, flexing like the bones of a real wing. You glance around. Some frames are tiny, no larger than a notebook. Others stretch across the full length of the shed, spanning wider than a man's reach. A historical fact rises. Leonardo produced dozens of detailed studies of bird flight, muscle mechanics, and wing structures, analyzing how lift, drag, and flapping patterns worked, centuries before aerodynamics became a science. Leonardo lifts a parchment from his work table. He holds it up to the light so the thin lines glow slightly. It's a sketch of a man lying face down, arms inside two enormous wings that curve outward like an angel's. Straps connect limb to limb. A system of pulleys links the arms to the wing membranes. He looks at you with soft amusement. Not to fly, he clarifies. To understand flight. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs playfully. I have no desire to plummet through the air like a stone. He points to another parchment, this one showing a bat wing. Birds, he says, are elegant. But bats reveal the truth of flexible flight. That's your eccentric curiosity. Leonardo admired bats and often sketched their wings, believing their membrane structure held a secret that feathers alone could not teach. Some found this odd. Others thought it brilliant. He hangs the parchment back on the wall, then picks up a small leather-bound book filled with compact sketches, muscles contracting, wings folding, birds diving and rising. He flips through it. Watch the swallow, he says softly. You follow his gaze outside. A swallow cuts down sharply, then rises in a smooth, effortless arc. Leonardo sketches in real time. Not the bird itself, but the motion of it, the curve of flight, the pattern of air the wings carve. It feels almost magical. He suddenly hands you the notebook. Do you see, he asks. Flight is not a miracle. It is a negotiation. You study the sketch. The lines feel alive, like they might lift off the page if you exhale too sharply. Leonardo crosses to a tall rack where rolled parchment is stored in neat bundles. He retrieves one, unfurls it, and weighty wooden clamps hold it down. This is the masterpiece you expected to see. A full plan for a glider. Long, sweeping wings. A supporting frame. A tail structure for stability. A harness for the pilot. Your breath catches. It feels possible. Leonardo's voice drops to a near whisper. One day, perhaps, the sky will allow us entry. He runs a finger along the drawn wing. His expression is a mixture of pride and longing. But then he hesitates. There is one question, he says, that haunts me still. He taps a note written in mirrored script beneath the drawing. Historians still debate whether Leonardo intended his flying machines as fully practical devices or as explorations meant more for understanding than for use. Some scholars argue that he solved parts of the puzzle but never intended to test them. Others believe he may have tried small experiments in secret. Leonardo looks at you. I know what the wings must do, he murmurs, but I do not yet know what men must do. He rolls the parchment slowly. Strength alone is not enough, nor courage. He pauses, staring again at the sky. Perhaps patience, perhaps precision, or perhaps humility. You notice a smaller object tucked behind a rack of broken reed frames. You pull it free. It's a tiny wooden model of a flapping wing device, two wings connected to a hinge and a winding mechanism. You turn the crank, and the wings flutter gently. Leonardo laughs. A toy, he says, but even toys whisper truths. You think of birds again, the way they rise, glide, and fold. And suddenly the idea of flight no longer feels imaginary. It feels inevitable. Leonardo opens the shed doors fully, letting sunlight flood the room. Wings glow like thin gold. Sketches flutter gently in the warm breeze. Feathers rustle. The air feels charged. He stands beside you, quiet, serene. Remember this moment, he says softly. The moment when the sky almost felt reachable. You close your eyes. Your breath slows. The warmth of the sun settles into your shoulders. The dream of flying, once distant, now feels as close as your next heartbeat. And standing beside Leonardo, in a courtyard bathed in soft Tuscan light, you believe that someday, he, or someone inspired by him, will finally touch the clouds. Leonardo leads you back through the courtyard and into a narrow passageway that slopes slightly downward. The sounds of Florence thin out again, replaced by the soft hum of wind funneling through the stone corridor. It feels cooler here, quieter, as if you're descending into a secret that the city itself prefers not to speak too loudly about. He reaches a wooden door reinforced with iron bands. It looks heavier than the ones you've seen before. Less workshop, more vault. Leonardo lifts the latch, and the hinges groan softly as the door swings inward. Inside is a round chamber lit by 4 small windows placed high in the walls. Sunlight pours through them in angled beams, illuminating motes of dust that drift like tiny planets in a slow orbit. And in the center of the chamber stands something extraordinary. A tall wooden pole rises from the floor to the ceiling. Wrapped around it is a large, spiraling structure made of reed, linen, and thin wooden ribs. It widens like the head of a giant screw, delicate yet imposing. The aerial screw. Leonardo's helicopter. He watches your reaction closely, his arms folded loosely, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Strange, is it not? He asks softly. You circle the machine. Its spiral canopy is smooth and pale, stretched linen-coated in a thin glaze of starch to stiffen its surface. The ribs curve outward with perfect symmetry, as if carved from a single shell. You place your palm on the smooth linen. It feels cool, almost like bone. Leonardo stands beside you. I wondered, he says, whether the air itself could be persuaded. You raise an eyebrow slightly. He chuckles. You persuade water with oars. You persuade stone with levers. Why not persuade air with a screw? You look upward at the spiral once more. The idea is astonishing, absurd, and brilliant all at once. A machine designed not to glide through air, but to climb it. A historical fact rises. Leonardo designed the aerial screw around 1485, describing it as a machine that could lift if turned fast enough. Though never tested in his lifetime, it anticipated aspects of helicopter physics centuries before any workable rotorcraft existed. Leonardo touches the central pole with gentle reverence. It must rotate, he says, turning his hands slowly to demonstrate. 4 men could turn these bars together like a dance. You imagine the effort. 4 people pushing against horizontal rods attached to the pole, turning the spiral canopy above. Would it lift? Would it twist the air enough to rise, even slightly? Historians still argue. Some believe Leonardo intended the machine merely as an exploration of vertical flight principles. Others insist he meant it to fly, perhaps even in scale models. And some think the materials of his time limited the dream. Leonardo's eyes glitter with quiet defiance. Let them argue, he murmurs. I only ask the air for conversation. You laugh softly. It's hard not to. He speaks to physics the way some people speak to old friends. He guides you to a small side table where sketches of the aerial screw lie in various stages of refinement. Some show the machine in cross-section. Others depict airflow patterns swirling upward in tight spirals. But one sketch catches your eye. A tiny figure, barely more than a silhouette, is clinging to the base of the machine as it spins, hair blown upward, cloak rippling. You glance at Leonardo sharply. He grins. No, he says calmly. I never attempted it. He holds up 2 fingers. Most likely. Then he winks, and you laugh again. There's your eccentric curiosity for this section. Rumors circulated that Leonardo might have experimented with small-scale models or even attempted minor lift tests, though evidence remains elusive. The idea of him clinging to a rotating pole like a determined inventor refusing defeat is equal parts comedic and awe-inspiring. He moves back toward the full-sized aerial screw, running his hand along the curved ribs. Flight from rotation, he muses. Not wings, but spirals. You watch him closely. His mind is turning even faster than the machine ever could. You ask him what inspired such an idea. He gestures toward a small drawer, opens it, and pulls out a handful of rough sketches. Some show seeds spinning in the air, long, curved seeds falling slowly in a corkscrew motion from the canopy of a tree. He lets one of the real seeds fall from his hand. It spirals down delicately, twisting in the air as though pausing between each inch of descent. The sycamore tree, he says. It gave me the idea. The seed lands at your feet. You pick it up gently. This moment feels strangely profound, like you're holding the ancestor of every helicopter rotor ever made. Leonardo's gaze softens. Nature is a patient tutor, he whispers. He walks to the far end of the chamber, pulling on a rope that hangs from the ceiling. The aerial screw rotates slightly, just an inch, but even that motion feels monumental. You hold your breath. He studies the movement, absorbing every creak and shift, every vibration of the pole, every flutter of the linen. It is not ready, he says. Not yet. He steps back. But someday, the air will understand. There is something tender in the way he says it, as if he believes the sky is a thinking creature, one that simply needs time to accept human presence. You step beside him. The aerial screw towers over you, glowing softly in the angled sunlight. For a moment, the world outside seems far away. There's only this chamber, this machine, this dream. Leonardo turns to you. Flight, he says, is the oldest desire. You feel it too, deep in your chest. The longing for upwardness, for weightlessness, for escape. He places a hand on the wooden ribs of the screw. Remember, he whispers, we are trying to rise. And as the dust swirls in a small upward spiral near your feet, you swear the room itself seems to lift, if only in spirit. Leonardo does not pause long after leaving the chamber of the aerial screw. He walks with a quicker pace now, as if some memory has stirred him into motion. The air shifts as you follow him through a shaded alleyway, the light above reduced to thin ribbons slipping between rooftops. Florence's noise returns in fragments, blacksmith hammers, impatient merchants, distant hooves, but here it all feels muted. Leonardo finally stops at a low stone structure tucked behind a larger building. The door is wide and heavy, reinforced with iron. He places his hand against it for a moment, as if steadying himself, then pushes it open. Inside, the room is colder than you expect. There are no windows, only lanterns hung from hooks, casting soft amber halos on the stone walls. And lining those walls, resting on shelves or leaning against beams, is an unexpected sight. Weapons. Not crude ones. Not instruments of blind destruction, but beautifully engineered devices, structures of elegance and terror in equal measure. Leonardo glances at your expression. Florence, he says quietly, is a city of art, but also a city of rivals. He walks slowly to a large wooden frame resting near the far wall. It is shaped like a dome, an overturned bowl made of curved planks reinforced by iron strips. Through small slits, you can see the faint gleam of metal inside. This, he says, is my armored car. You've seen it in sketches earlier, but here, in full scale, it commands a different kind of presence. It looks like a giant beetle poised to advance across a battlefield. Leonardo circles it with you. 8 men inside, he explains, turning cranks. The wheels move. The shell protects. He touches one of the slits. And here, cannons. You imagine it rolling forward across rough ground, smoke seeping from the openings, the air trembling with force. But you also notice something else. The gears beneath are arranged in a complex configuration, almost too delicate for real use. Historians still argue whether Leonardo intentionally sabotaged the gearing system so that no military commander could use the machine effectively. Some believe he feared what such a device might unleash. Others think it was simply an early design, still awaiting refinement. Leonardo doesn't clarify. He only taps the frame once, a faint melancholy settling in his voice. Machines obey their makers, he says, and men are not always wise. He guides you further inside, deeper into the shadows. On the next table rests a crossbow, so enormous it looks like it could launch trees rather than arrows. The arms are bent wood, thick as beams, held together by braids of reinforced cord. A massive winch sits at the back. Leonardo runs his fingers along the polished surface. A giant crossbow, he explains, to frighten armies before the first shot. He pulls open a drawer and reveals a smaller version, perfectly scaled, beautifully crafted. A model for the Duke of Milan, he adds. A historical fact drifts up. Leonardo wrote letters to Ludovico Sforza, listing war machines he could build, catapults, bridges, armored vehicles, to gain patronage. Though brilliant, these letters also reveal the political pressure of the era. Invention was survival. Leonardo senses your contemplation. Do not mistake me, he says gently. I prefer creation to destruction. He moves to another structure leaning against the wall, an array of rotating barrels attached to a central axle. Multiple firing cannon, he says, so soldiers may reload one row while another fires. It is ingenious and chilling. You swallow softly. Leonardo studies your expression again. Florence, he says, was not peaceful when I began my work, nor was Milan, nor Rome, nor anywhere touched by ambition. He lifts a wooden crank from the table and hands it to you. Turn. You do. The barrels spin with surprising smoothness, each slot locking into alignment before rotating away. The clicking sound echoes lightly in the chamber, rhythmic and unsettling. Leonardo places a steadying hand on the axle. This is a study in timing, he says, and fear. He steps back from the machinery and moves toward a wooden chest tucked beneath a workbench. He opens it quietly, revealing piles of parchment, designs of snares, barricades, submerged barriers, and strange underwater devices shaped to damage ships without harming sailors. One sketch, in particular, draws your eye: a diver in a leather suit, tubes extending upward, a small blade tucked discreetly near the wrist. Leonardo notices your gaze. Even war, he murmurs, requires silence sometimes. He does not elaborate. He does not need to. Your mind lingers on the image, its intimacy, its strangeness. When he closes the chest, he seems older, his shoulders set slightly heavier than before. You walk with him back toward the armored car. He lifts the lantern, illuminating the interior through one of the slits. Wooden braces and beams form a cramped, circular space. Imagine 8 men in here, he says softly, breathing in time with the turning of the cranks. You imagine it. The heat, the noise, the pounding of hearts inside a wooden cocoon rolling toward danger. Leonardo steps away, extinguishing one lantern after another as he moves through the room. It grows darker, quieter, more intimate. He stops beside the giant crossbow, tracing its curve with a gentle touch. I built these not because I love war, he says, but because I hope perhaps to end it. You tilt your head. He sighs. Show them something impossible, he says, something terrible, something overwhelming, and maybe they choose peace. You know, of course, that the world never really learned such lessons. But Leonardo's intention lingers in the dimness like a candle flame refusing to go out. Your eccentric curiosity arrives quietly as he kneels before a pile of metal components in the corner. Small gears, twisted rods, broken pulleys. These, he says, smiling faintly, are the failed ideas. He picks up a bent metal hook. I keep them, he adds, to remind myself that even mistakes have shapes worth studying. He turns it in his hands, examining its curve as if it contains a secret lost to time. Then he stands again, lantern in hand, and moves toward the door. "Come," he says softly. "There are better dreams waiting." The door opens, spilling warm Florence light across the floor, washing away the gloom like water rinsing soot from stone. You step outside with him. The sharp smell of iron fades. Fresh air fills your lungs. Behind you, the room returns to shadows, its dangerous beauty sealed once more. Leonardo lifts his gaze toward the sky. "Remember," he whispers, "even the darkest machines are born from human imagination, and imagination can always choose light." Leonardo does not head back toward the busy heart of Florence after leaving the Chamber of War Machines. Instead, he turns down a quieter street, one lined with tall stone walls draped in vines, where the city's noise dims into a distant murmur. You follow him into a wide-open square edged by low workshops and half-built wooden scaffolds. The air smells different here, cooler, fresher, and beneath that freshness, you sense the faint, constant pulse of running water. Leonardo stops at the edge of the square, closes his eyes, and listens. You do the same. At first you hear only your own breath, then the soft splash of water falling somewhere out of sight, then the low groan of a turning wheel. Leonardo gestures for you to follow the sound. You round a corner, and there it is, a large water wheel set into a stone channel, fed by a diverted stream from the Arno. The wheel turns steadily, wooden paddles dipping into the rushing water, lifting droplets that sparkle as they scatter into the air. Leonardo stands beside it like a man greeting an old friend. "Water," he says, "is the most obedient force in the world." He touches the wheel's frame gently. It obeys gravity. It obeys shape. It obeys time. You step closer, feeling the rhythmic vibrations through the wooden platform beneath your feet. The wheel powers a series of gears that disappear into a low building nearby, where the muffled sound of grinding stone hints at flour mills or metalworking equipment. Leonardo leads you into the building. Inside, a series of wooden shafts spins steadily, transferring the wheel's motion through a web of gears. Some power a lathe. Others drive a small hammer that rises and falls with clock-like regularity. A historical fact stirs. Leonardo created detailed hydraulic engineering plans, designing everything from water pumps and canal locks to irrigation systems and flood control mechanisms. His notebooks overflow with sketches of valves, wheels, and layered canal cities. Leonardo picks up a parchment from a table near the wall. On it is a drawing of a water-lifting device, a double-acting pump with 2 cylinders and a crankshaft. He hands it to you. "See how the water rises?" he asks softly. "One chamber fills while the other empties. 2 movements, 1 flow." The mechanism is elegant, simple at first glance, yet incredibly advanced. You run your hand along the parchment. The mirrored writing curls around the drawing like vines around a trellis. Leonardo turns toward a cluttered corner of the workshop where several prototypes sit in various states of completion. One resembles a large wooden screw inside a hollow cylinder. Another looks like a chain of wooden paddles attached to a turning wheel. He lifts the wooden screw and smiles. "A screw pump," he explains. "Useful for lifting water when you cannot rely on the river's own generosity." You hold it carefully. It's heavier than it looks. Leonardo walks to a small basin nearby and dips the bottom end of the screw into the water. He turns the handle slowly, and water begins to climb upward along the threads until it spills into a trough. You can't help smiling. It feels like witnessing a magic trick performed with perfect, simple honesty. Leonardo observes the water flow with near meditative focus. "Movement," he says, "is the language of the world." He motions for you to follow him outside again. You walk along the narrow water channel, feeding the wheel. The water rushes down the channel, bright and lively, carrying twigs and petals along its surface. Leonardo kneels beside it, dipping his fingers into the flow. "Water," he whispers, "remembers." You tilt your head slightly. He continues. "It remembers the shape of the riverbed. It remembers the curve of the banks. It even remembers the seasons." You sit beside him as he draws a quick sketch in the dirt, a forked waterway splitting into two channels. One channel floods the fields, he explains, while the other feeds the mills. He smooths the drawing, then redraws it with different angles. But change the angle here, he says, and the water chooses a different path. His fingers move lightly over the dirt, as if guiding the water with invisible lines. A faint smile touches his lips. You can teach water, he says, to do almost anything. You tilt your face toward the sun and breathe in the riverside air. There is something calming about the rhythm of the wheel turning and the water rushing. Steady, dependable, ancient. Leonardo rises and walks along the channel until you reach a broader section of the riverbank. Workers are clearing debris from a partially collapsed retaining wall, shouting to each other as they pass stones up a line. Leonardo watches them for a moment. Then he gestures for you to look at the river itself. Do you see the turbulence? He asks. You nod. The water swirls around a large rock jutting from the center of the flow, creating a spiraling whirlpool. Leonardo takes out his notebook. This, he says, sketching rapidly, is the form of resistance. You watch the whirlpool twist in upon itself, forming a cone of motion that extends downward into the unseen depths. Leonardo marks the direction of the spray, the curvature of the waves, the angles of the eddies. Water teaches us, he murmurs, how force behaves. A soft pause settles between you again. Then, unexpectedly, Leonardo bends down and scoops a handful of water, letting it stream slowly between his fingers. Did you know, he says, some believe that water has a spirit? There's your eccentric curiosity. Certain Renaissance scholars, influenced by ancient Greek philosophy and folk beliefs, argued that water held a kind of living essence, something that could be angered, soothed, or appeased. Leonardo doesn't confirm or deny the idea. He only watches the water fall from his hand. Perhaps they are wrong, he says. Or perhaps they simply choose a different vocabulary. A moment passes. He leads you farther along the bank to where a series of wooden stakes reinforces a section of earth. He taps one with his foot, testing the stability. Florence, he says, is always at war with floods. You recall the historical fact. The Arno River has flooded countless times, reshaping the city, washing out bridges and destroying workshops. Leonardo studied these floods obsessively, sketching diagrams of their force and proposing large-scale engineering solutions. He takes a deep breath. Some argue, he says, that I sought to redesign the entire river. There's your academic debate. Scholars still dispute how seriously Leonardo pursued his ambitious plan to reroute or reshape the Arno to protect Florence and provide new trade routes. Some think he was entirely serious. Others believe it was an intellectual challenge he admired but never intended to implement fully. Leonardo turns to you. Maybe the truth, he says softly, is that I simply wanted to understand the pulse of the world. You walk beside him as the sun dips slightly lower. The water wheel continues its eternal turning. The river continues its eternal flowing. And Leonardo continues his eternal search for motion, pattern, meaning. You can feel the tranquility drifting through you now, like water smoothing the edges of a stone. Leonardo smiles gently. Come, he whispers. There is one more wonder to see. And together you walk along the shimmering edge of the river. Its voice soft but constant, its motion endless and soothing, like a lullaby written centuries before you ever arrived. Leonardo leads you away from the riverbank, following a narrow road that bends gently toward higher ground. The sounds of rushing water fade behind you, replaced by the hum of Florence in the distance. Distant chatter, scattered laughter, a few barking dogs, and the rhythmic tapping of cobblers shaping leather under shaded awnings. But here, the city begins to thin, its density loosening into patches of open space. You notice something different in Leonardo's gait. He isn't walking aimlessly, nor is he studying birds or shadows the way he did before. Now he moves with purpose, like someone guiding you toward a memory or a dream he has carried too long. The path widens into a plateau overlooking the city. From up here, Florence stretches outward in a warm patchwork of terracotta roofs, slender towers, market squares, and twisting medieval alleys. The Arno cuts through it like a silver ribbon, its bridges appearing almost toy-like from this distance. Leonardo stops at the edge of the overlook and lets out a slow breath. "Beautiful," he whispers, "but fragile." You tilt your head. He opens his notebook, not the small one, but a larger ledger bound in dark leather. The pages crackle softly as he turns them, revealing a surprising sight. Rows of perfectly straight streets, layered platforms, elevated waterways, enclosed courtyards, structured neighborhoods, an entire city drawn with geometric clarity. It is nothing like Florence. It is cleaner, straighter, healthier, safer. A city born not from chance or ancient habit, but from deliberate human design. Leonardo taps a particular drawing, a street flanked by columns, its walkway raised above a lower level where waste and runoff flow through covered channels. A city, he says softly, should breathe. He shows you another page, an overhead view of a perfectly symmetrical town center, surrounded by wide roads that allow carts and riders to pass without clogging the streets. A city, he adds, should move. Another page reveals a network of elevated walkways, clean and sunlit, while a second system below houses workers, animals, and cargo transport. And, he whispers, a city should protect its people. You kneel beside him, studying the drawings. The lines are clean, precise, intentional. A historical fact emerges. After witnessing outbreaks of plague and the filthy congestion of medieval cities, Leonardo began designing an ideal city with modern sanitation, ventilation, and traffic control, centuries ahead of its time. Leonardo turns another page. This one shows a beautiful three-level design. The ground level for commerce, the middle level for residential life, the upper level for clean pedestrian pathways exposed to sunlight. This, he says, is what Florence could be. You look down at the city below. It's stunning, yes, but also chaotic, crowded. Its narrow medieval streets twist unpredictably, trapping odors, waste, heat. Leonardo watches your reaction. It is not the city's fault, he murmurs. It was built before we understood how disease travels, how waste accumulates, how people move. He lifts his gaze to the skyline of towers and domes. But imagine, he says, a place where architecture itself protects life. He shows you a sketch of a covered canal system running under a series of bridges, designed to flush waste away quickly. Another shows ventilated courtyards spreading clean air through cluster homes. Leonardo's voice lowers. You cannot see sickness, he says, but you can design to defeat it. You feel a strange calm settle around you. It's peaceful to stand here, above the noise, above the confusion, and imagine a city that moves like clockwork, breathes like a living organism, and shelters its people with thoughtful intention. Leonardo closes the notebook. Come, he says, walking a few steps toward a patch of ground where the soil is packed flat, as if once used for construction practice. He kneels and draws in the dirt, one long straight line, then another, then a square framing a central plaza. He pauses, looks up at you, and smiles. I used to dream of building it, he admits. There's your academic debate moment. Scholars still argue whether Leonardo ever seriously proposed constructing his ideal city or whether it existed only on paper as an intellectual exercise. Some think he wanted to rebuild parts of Milan after the plague. Others believe he knew such a project would be too expensive for any patron to fund. Leonardo stands again, brushing dirt from his hands. Perhaps, he says, the world was not ready. You study his sketches again. The lines feel timeless, more modern than Renaissance. You can almost imagine tall glass structures and steel bridges emerging from these drawings centuries later. Leonardo glances toward the distant city. Its irregular streets shimmer in the midday sun. I do not blame Florence, he says softly. It grew the way a child grows, unplanned, sometimes unbalanced, but with a fierce and natural beauty. You feel that beauty now. The terracotta glow, the tangled veins of alleys, the warmth of history pressed together in a living tapestry. Leonardo sits on a stone ledge and gestures for you to join him. A gentle breeze brushes past. The view stretches far, rolling hills dotted with cypress trees meeting the horizon in soft waves. After a long moment, Leonardo opens the notebook again, this time to a different type of drawing. A city gate. But unlike traditional gates, this one incorporates a cleverly concealed defense system. Slits, counterweights, and tension springs. Protection, he says, without intimidation. He flips to another page. This one shows a graceful, arching bridge with a segmented deck designed to lift in sections for boats to pass beneath. Movement, he murmurs. You realize something quietly profound. Leonardo's ideal city isn't merely architectural. It's philosophical, a place where infrastructure serves harmony, where design respects human dignity, where daily life flows without conflict. He closes the notebook slowly. My city, he whispers, is a dream of balance. But then he adds with a soft, almost humorous sigh. Balance, he says, is the most difficult thing to build. Your eccentric curiosity arrives when he pulls from his pocket a small wooden model, barely the size of your palm. It's a miniature rotating street cleaning device, fitted with tiny brushes and a crank. You turn it curiously. Leonardo beams. I thought, he says, if the streets will not clean themselves, perhaps a machine could. He shrugs lightly. People found the idea amusing. He sets the tiny model on the stone ledge, where it sits like a lost artifact from a future that never came. Leonardo looks at you again, his expression softening. Cities, he says quietly, are promises. He closes his notebook and stands. But not all promises can be built. The breeze picks up, rustling the pages before he secures them with a leather tie. He steps forward again, gazing out at Florence, its imperfections, its vibrancy, its stubborn, irresistible charm. And for a moment, silence holds the two of you like the quiet pause between heartbeats. Then Leonardo turns back toward the path. Come, he whispers. There is more to show you. And the dream of the ideal city fades gently behind you, as fragile and beautiful as a sketch inside a closed notebook. Leonardo leads you down from the hillside, weaving through olive trees and winding footpaths until Florence begins to gather around you again. But instead of heading toward the louder districts, he slips through a narrow archway into a quieter quarter of the city, one known more for workshops and artisan guilds than markets or taverns. You can hear it before you see it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, a gentle clatter, a bright, metallic pluck, something between a lute rehearsal and a carpenter's bench. Leonardo steps into a long, airy room with open windows that let in warm light. Sawdust carpets the stone floor. Shelves line the walls, cluttered with wooden frames, strings, rods, wheels, and metal fittings. It smells like cedar, oil, and faintly, almost sweetly like varnish. This is a different kind of workshop, a musical one. Leonardo glides toward a central table where a half-finished contraption rests. A tangle of strings stretched over a curved wooden belly, connected to a series of metal rods that disappear into a rotating wheel. You tilt your head. Leonardo smiles. A mechanical drum and lyre, he explains. It plays when you turn the crank, like a musician who never grows tired. He hands you the crank. You turn it slowly. The wheel rotates, pulling the rods, striking tiny hammers against taut strings. A soft, rhythmic melody fills the room, imperfect but oddly soothing, like a lullaby composed by gears. Leonardo's eyes brighten. Music, he says, is mathematics made audible. A historical fact rises gently. Leonardo believed that music and mechanics were deeply intertwined, studying sound waves, instrument acoustics, and harmonic proportions alongside his engineering designs. His notebooks even describe how sound travels through air as waves, an idea far ahead of his time. Leonardo turns toward another table where a different device sits, smaller, box-shaped, with a crank and a set of small hammers arranged inside. This one, he says, is a portable organ. He taps the wooden box lightly. For moments when a musician cannot be found, he says it with a playful tone, and you can't help laughing softly. He opens the box, revealing rows of thin metal tongues, reeds, each cut to a specific length. When he turns the crank, air blows across them, producing soft chiming tones that mingle with the warm afternoon light pouring through the windows. The sound is delicate, like wind singing inside a hollow reed. Leonardo closes the box and walks to a third table, where an object lies beneath a cloth. He removes the cloth slowly, revealing something that looks familiar, yet strange. A lute, but thicker, heavier, shaped with unusual curves and fitted with a reinforced neck. He lifts it and plucks a string. The sound is rich, deeper than a typical lute, resonant enough to vibrate faintly through the floor. A hybrid instrument, he explains. Half lute, half viol. He hands it to you. You run your fingers along the smooth wood. It feels like holding a piece of architecture, a structure built not just for sound, but for thought. Leonardo walks toward a tall shelf filled with smaller oddities, spinning tops, rotating lamps, miniature automata shaped like birds or lions. He picks up a small bird carved from walnut wood, with tiny flaps for wings. He winds a tiny spring and sets the bird on the table. It hops once, then flutters its wings. It doesn't fly, of course, but the attempt is enough to make you smile. Leonardo nods, satisfied. Not everything I make must be grand, he says. Some things are simply pleasant. Your eccentric curiosity arrives exactly here. Leonardo often built whimsical devices, moving animals, musical toys, theatrical illusions, purely for entertainment or curiosity, not utility. Patrons and nobles adored them. He sets the walnut bird aside and leads you toward a larger contraption leaning against the back wall. It resembles a long tube mounted on a wooden frame, with holes drilled along its length and bellows attached near the base. He pumps the bellows, and a soft, airy hum rises inside the tube. Then he adjusts a lever, and the pitch shifts into something deeper, smoother. An experiment, he murmurs. A wind machine. You tilt your head. For music, he clarifies. And storms. You blink. He laughs. It is not finished yet. He removes his hand from the lever, and the hum fades. Then Leonardo motions toward a corner where parchment sketches are pinned to the wall in chaotic layers. You step closer and begin to study them. Some show instruments with multiple necks. Others show strange, rotating wheels with bells attached. One appears to be a drum that writes shapes in sand as it vibrates. Leonardo joins you. I wanted, he says softly, to understand sound. He traces a curve on one of the sketches. Why does a low note move through the air differently than a high one? Why do some tones comfort us, while others unsettle the mind? He looks toward the open windows where sunlight spills across the floor. Sound, he whispers, is a kind of invisible architecture. You walk with him deeper into the workshop. He stops at a long table, holding an instrument unlike anything you've seen before. It has strings, yes, but also wheels, paddles, and a system of levers connected to wooden hammers that produce a rolling rhythm when activated. A rhythm machine, he says quietly, for dancers, for soldiers, for festivals. He taps a lever. A soft drumming begins, steady, even, calming, like a heartbeat. You realize why he brought you here, not just to show his playful side, but to reveal a truth. That invention isn't always about grand machines or soaring ambitions. Sometimes it's about joy, curiosity, delight, the simple pleasure of making something that moves the air in new ways. Leonardo sits on a small stool in the corner and picks up a different lute, this one ordinary. He plays a gentle phrase. It is slow, warm, tender. You close your eyes for a moment. The lute's sound blends with the faint hum of the wind machine, the delicate chime of the portable organ, the distant city noises. It feels safe. When you open your eyes, Leonardo is watching you, not as a teacher or a mastermind, but as someone who understands the need for quiet moments. He sets the lute down. Machines, he says, often frighten people. But music reminds them that machines can also dream. He gestures toward the door. Come, he whispers. This dream is gentle. There are others waiting. Leonardo leaves the musical workshop behind with a soft nod to the air, as if the melody still lingering in the room, deserves a wordless farewell. Outside, the light has shifted, no longer the warm gold of late morning, but something a little gentler, softer, leaning toward the cooler tones of early afternoon. The shadows are longer now, stretching like fingers from the corners of buildings and the undersides of awnings. You follow him down a narrow lane that slopes gradually toward a cluster of buildings built close together, almost too close, like they grew from the same seed. Their walls are patched and worn, but somewhere inside them, something mechanical hums faintly. Leonardo stops in front of a low wooden door with iron hinges. It looks unremarkable, plain even, but he smiles the way someone smiles when they are about to reveal a secret. This, he says quietly, is where movement learns to imitate life. He pushes the door open. Inside is a surprisingly spacious chamber. Sturdy beams overhead, stone walls bare except for shelves of tools, pulleys, gears, and leather straps. But what draws your attention immediately is the figure standing in the center of the room. A knight, not a man wearing armor. A full suit of armor shaped like a man, its joints hinged with careful precision, its torso slightly open, exposing an interior world of wooden wheels, springs, cables, and rods engineered with impossibly delicate geometry. Leonardo's robot knight. You step toward it slowly. It stands about as tall as an average soldier, broad breastplate, articulated gauntlets, visor shaped like a stern, expressionless mask. But unlike a normal suit of armor, this one has life hidden in its bones. Leonardo places his hand on its metal arm, and the armor emits a faint click. Many believe machines cannot mimic the human body, he murmurs. But the body is a system, and systems can be studied. He gestures toward the open torso. Inside, the arrangement is mesmerizing. A network of pulleys to imitate muscle tension, cables to represent tendons, levers for joints, wooden drums that rotate to simulate breathing. A historical fact surfaces. Leonardo designed an early humanoid automaton around the 1490s, a mechanical knight capable of sitting, standing, lifting its visor, and possibly moving its arms through an internal system of pulleys and gears. The design was rediscovered only in the 20th century when researchers decoded his notes. Leonardo lifts a small crank from a table. Watch. He inserts it into a hidden slot at the knight's back and turns it slowly. There's a soft cascade of clicks inside the armor. Gentle, precise, like the inner workings of clock. Then, incredibly, the knight raises its arm. Only slightly, but deliberately. The gesture feels almost polite, almost hesitant, like a man greeting you for the first time. You take a small step back, breath caught in your throat. Leonardo smiles at your reaction. Movement, he says, is made of small decisions. He turns the crank again, and the visor lifts halfway. The hollow interior gleams in the dim light. For a moment, the knight appears to be looking at you. Not alive, no, but present. Leonardo stops the mechanism and steps around to the front. The trick, he says softly, tapping the knight's chest, is understanding proportion. Too much force, and the joints break. Too little, and movement dies before it begins. You study the interior again. The cables and drums remind you of anatomical drawings. The same curves, the same structural elegance. Leonardo notices your observation. The machine, he says, is a mirror of the body. There is your academic debate. Scholars still discuss whether Leonardo intended this automaton for battlefield demonstration, theatrical performance, or as a private exercise in biomechanics. Some believe he envisioned a full army of such machines. Others think it was merely a thought experiment taken a bit too far. Leonardo returns to a workbench and picks up a leather pouch. He empties it onto the table, revealing several strange metal components. Curved rods, small gears, hook clasps, pieces shaped like ribs. Failings, he says casually. Every mechanism teaches you something. He attaches one of the curved rods to the knight's torso, testing the tension on a cable. It snaps slightly, then settles into place. Better, he murmurs. Then he steps back, considering the entire automaton with a thoughtful expression. I once imagined, he says, a man of metal who could guard a prince without fear, who could stand without tiring, who could march without pain. He shakes his head lightly, amused by his own ambition. It was a foolish dream, or perhaps an early one. Your eccentric curiosity appears quietly when he opens a long wooden box beneath the workbench. Inside are early sketches of mechanical lions. Yes, lions, some standing, others seated, all with gears drawn inside their bodies. One of these, he says with a grin, opened its chest to reveal lilies. You stare at him, unsure whether he is exaggerating. He raises an eyebrow. It walked, he says proudly. Not far, but enough. You imagine a wooden lion walking stiffly across a banquet hall to surprise a king. It's both impressive and faintly comedic. Leonardo returns to the knight. He places his hand gently on the polished metal of its chest. Machines, he says, can remind us of ourselves, but they can also remind us of what we are not. The knight stands silent, unmoving, but somehow majestic, like a sentinel frozen in time. Leonardo steps to your side. Come, he whispers. Let me show you one more thing. He turns the crank once more, but this time slower. The knight bows its head, just slightly, but unmistakably. A mechanical bow, a gesture of respect engineered from gears, cables, and human imagination. The room grows still. Even the dust, suspended in the sunbeam, seems to pause. Leonardo removes the crank and places it gently on the table. Sometimes, he says, the illusion of life is enough. He extinguishes one of the lamps, leaving the room half in shadow. The night stands half-lit, half-lost, like a dream suspended between waking and sleep. Leonardo nods toward the door. There is movement, he says softly, in everything we dream. And as the two of you step back into the warm Florentine air, you can't help glancing over your shoulder one last time, half expecting the night to turn, follow, or raise a silent hand in farewell. It doesn't, but the possibility lingers like a breath you haven't yet released. Leonardo leads you away from the automaton chamber, closing the door gently behind him as if sealing away a living creature that needs its quiet. Outside, the afternoon air greets you again, warmer, richer, shifting with the lazy pace of midday Florence. The streets are busier now, merchants calling out prices, children dashing past with bursts of laughter, horses clopping steadily toward the marketplace. But Leonardo walks through the bustle as if none of it touches him. His mind is elsewhere, already folding and unfolding ideas like parchment sheets. He turns into a quieter alley, then another, until he reaches a modest wooden door tucked beneath an overhanging balcony. He unlocks it with a small iron key and gestures for you to enter. The moment you step inside, the smell wraps around you like a living thing. Ink, oil, dust, a faint, sweet trace of old parchment. This room isn't a workshop. It's a sanctuary. Stacks of bound volumes fill the shelves. Loose sheets spill from cabinets. Some notebooks lie open on tables, their pages weighted by stones or small gears to keep them from curling. This is Leonardo's mind, made visible. He walks to a long table illuminated by a single shaft of sunlight, where 3 notebooks lie open in a fan. Each page is dense with writing, but not the usual kind. The letters curve backward, each word mirrored as though reflected in water. Leonardo's left-handed mirror script. He touches the page lightly. People think, he says, that I wrote this way to conceal secrets. You trace a mirrored sentence with your eyes. It feels both readable and unreadable, as if it resists full understanding until you tilt your head just right. There is truth, Leonardo continues softly, but not the whole truth. He dips his quill into ink and writes a few words. The letters flow effortlessly backward, so fast, so fluid that it almost seems natural. It is easier for my hand, he explains. Less smudging, less friction. There's your historical fact. Leonardo wrote nearly all his notes in left-handed mirror script, likely to avoid dragging his hand across wet ink. It had the added effect of making his notebooks unusually private. He closes the notebook and opens another, this one filled with dense sketches. Muscles, hydraulic systems, wing structures, portrait studies, mechanical diagrams, architectural designs, maps, jokes, shopping lists, poems, dreams. You scan the pages slowly. The diversity is dizzying, yet somehow everything feels connected, part of one vast, coherent curiosity. Leonardo watches your eyes travel. A notebook, he says, is a map of the mind. Mine requires mini maps. He opens a smaller volume bound in worn leather. The pages are thinner, more fragile. Inside, a swirling sketch of water eddies. Notes comparing the shapes of clouds to smoke. A diagram of how candlelight reflects in a spherical surface. A list of questions. So many questions. Some simple, some profound, some almost haunting. How does the heart move blood? What's the sound of a dream? Why do people laugh? How does water remember a rock after flowing around it? What makes beauty? Leonardo traces a fingertip over that final question. I've been asking that one, he whispers since boyhood. You feel your breath deepen, your mind slowing to match the gentle cadence of the room. Leonardo moves to a shelf and retrieves a rolled parchment. He unrolls it slowly, anchoring the edges with small brass weights. The drawing sprawled across. It is fascinating and strange. A city viewed from above. Perfect perspective. Rivers winding like living veins. Mountains outlined with delicate precision. This, he says, is the Val di Chiana. A historical detail flickers. Leonardo produced several remarkably accurate maps for military and engineering purposes, decades before cartography embraced modern surveying methods. Some of his maps helped generals plan campaigns. Leonardo taps the map lightly. To understand a place, he says, you must see it from above. He closes the map and guides you to another section of the room, a low wooden chest. Inside are loose sheets covered with wild ideas. Wings shaped like leaves, sketches of fantastical creatures, notes about the moon's glow, a design for a machine that pulls itself forward like a crawling insect. Leonardo chuckles softly. Not everything I draw is serious. He lifts a page showing a caricatured man with an enormous nose and impossibly tiny legs. Your eccentric curiosity emerges here. Leonardo loved drawing grotesques, exaggerated faces and comical figures that mocked vanity, corruption, or simply amused him. His sketchbooks are filled with them. He places the drawing aside and opens a different notebook, this one filled with mathematical notation, angles, and geometric instructions. He taps a spiral diagram. The golden ratio, he murmurs. Some believe it is the key to beauty. He tilts his head. Perhaps. Perhaps not. There's your academic debate moment. Scholars still argue how strongly Leonardo believed in the golden ratio as a universal law. Some say he used it deliberately. Others argue he merely explored it without elevating it to cosmic significance. Leonardo closes the notebook and sets it gently on the table. You look around again, at the towering shells of ideas, at the sketches fluttering lightly in the draft, at the careful precision of every line, curve, and notation. How? You ask quietly. Do you keep all of this inside your mind? He lifts his gaze to yours. I don't, he says softly. That is why I write. He walks toward the far corner of the room, where a single leather-bound volume sits on a lectern. This one is different, larger, more formal, almost monumental. He opens it with reverence. Inside are his anatomical studies. Heart valves, skulls, tendons, the mechanics of breathing, drawn with the precision of both an artist and a surgeon. You feel your breath slow again. Every page is a universe. Leonardo leans over one of the drawings. I once hoped, he whispers, to publish these, to teach others what I have learned. He closes the page gently. But time, he says, moves faster than ink. You feel a quiet ache in those words. If only his notebooks had been published in his lifetime, medicine and science might have leapt centuries ahead. He ties the leather strap around the big volume and steps back. Come, he says. There is still daylight left. As you follow him toward the doorway, you glance back one last time at the notebooks, thousands of thoughts resting in silence. You realize something quietly profound. A mind can be a workshop, but can also be a library. And Leonardo's mind was both, overflowing, unending, always expanding beyond the walls that tried to contain it. Leonardo walks with you through a quieter part of Florence, taking narrow lanes that weave between tall stone buildings. The light has shifted again, sliding into the softer hues of mid-afternoon. Shadows lengthen across the cobbles, and the air cools just a touch, carrying the faint smell of wet mortar from a nearby workshop. He stops at a modest building. Not large, not imposing. Yet something about the doorway feels important, as if countless ideas have passed through it like travelers on a silent pilgrimage. He opens the door for you. Inside, the workshop is bathed in warm, liquid light filtering through a high window. Dust motes drift like drifting sparks, shimmering as they drift toward the ground. But your attention is immediately drawn to the center of the room. A massive canvas, still unfinished. A woman sits in the foreground, her hands folded, her expression soft but unreadable. Yet the face is only sketched, faint outlines suggesting a calm serenity. The background is little more than swirling underpainting, layers of imagined geography forming mountains, rivers, mist. Leonardo stands before it. He doesn't smile. He doesn't speak. He simply watches the canvas as though studying an old friend. This, he says quietly, is not a portrait. You tilt your head. He gestures to the canvas. It is an investigation. He steps closer and touches a fine brush resting near the palette. People think painting is about likeness, he continues. But likeness is the least interesting thing. He dips the brush lightly into a thin wash of pigment. Painting, he murmurs, is the study of light. He moves the brush in gentle arcs, adding a faint shadow beneath the sitter's chin. The movement is slow, meditative, almost hypnotic. Each stroke seems to blend into the next, as though the air itself softens to accept the pigment. You feel your breathing sink to the rhythm of his hand. Leonardo sets the brush down and steps aside so you can see the canvas up close. Details appear you didn't notice before. Tiny, meticulous layers of translucent color building depth in the folds of the clothing. The faint, almost subconscious transition between tones. The way the sitter's slight smile seems to form and dissolve simultaneously. A historical fact rises. Leonardo pioneered sfumato, the technique of creating soft, smoky transitions between shades, giving his work its haunting, lifelike realism. No harsh lines. No abrupt edges, only gradual cloud-like shifts. Leonardo leans quietly toward you. You cannot cut light into pieces, he whispers. You must let it breathe. He turns toward a wooden table near the wall, where several small experiments lie scattered. Thin glass spheres filled with water. A sheet of parchment showing how light refracts through droplets. A drawing of a candle flame reflected in a curved metal surface. Light, he says, is a traveler, and I follow its footsteps. He picks up one of the spheres, holds it to the window, and rotates it slowly. The floor shifts, tiny rainbows forming and dissolving. You watch, entranced. Leonardo sets the sphere down and reaches for another parchment. This one is a study of hands, dozens of them, each drawn with different shading, angles, and tension. Hands grasping cloth, hands relaxed, hands clasped, hands reaching. He touches the page gently. The hands, he murmurs, are more difficult than the face. A face may lie. Hands cannot. You study the drawings and feel their realism press gently against you. He continues. A painter, he says, is a scientist of appearances. He gestures toward another canvas leaning against the far wall. This one is faint, barely a few shapes. But you recognize the early structure of a famous composition. Figures arranged in a triangle, faces turned in dramatic tension. You walk closer, noticing the geometric grid lightly sketched beneath the painting. This is your academic debate moment. Scholars still argue how deliberately Leonardo used geometry and mathematical ratios in his compositions. Some say it was precise and intentional. Others believe the harmony came from instinct rather than calculated grids. Leonardo answers your unspoken question. I use geometry, he says softly, to understand harmony. But harmony is not ruled by numbers. He touches the unfinished canvas. It is ruled by the soul. You feel a hush settle across the workshop. Leonardo moves toward a bench where small jars of pigments sit. Ochre, ultramarine, verdigris, lead white. He opens one and shows you the powder inside. Pigment, he says, is earth. Painting is how earth meets light. He mixes a tiny amount with oil, grinding it slowly. The motion is rhythmic, circular, gentle, deliberate, almost soothing. He hands you the brush. Try. You hesitate. He nods. You touch the pigment to the edge of the canvas. It feels wrong at first, your hand clumsy compared to his. But the soft transitions, the blending, the delicate rhythm begins to calm your nerves. Leonardo observes without judgment. Do you feel it? He asks quietly. The weight of the brush, the breath of the pigment, the movement of the hand. You nod. He smiles. That is painting. He stands beside you as warm sunlight spills across the room, illuminating the canvas like a blessing. Then he pulls out a small parchment from beneath a stack and hands it to you. It is a diagram of human expressions, eyebrows raised, lips pressed, eyes wide, eyes lowered. Each expression accompanied by notes describing the muscles that activate it. Your eccentric curiosity moment arrives. Leonardo studied facial expressions obsessively, even dissecting cadavers to understand how muscles of the face created emotion. His notebooks include some of the earliest studies of psychological physiology. Leonardo sits on a low stool and studies the main canvas again. A painting, he says, must do more than show a face. It must show a life. He looks toward the sitter's soft, enigmatic smile. A single curve, he whispers, can hold an entire story. The room grows quiet. You can feel the heartbeat of the workshop, the hush of brush bristles, the soft scent of oil, the slow drift of dust in the warm air. Leonardo finally speaks again, almost to himself. When you paint, he says, you become a witness. He stands and moves toward the door. Come, he whispers. There are other witnesses waiting. And as you step out into the Florentine afternoon, leaving behind the world of pigments and light, you realize something profound. For Leonardo, art wasn't a craft. It was a way of seeing truth. Leonardo leads you deeper into the studio quarter of Florence, where the air grows heavy with the scent of plaster, pigment, and wet mortar. The alley narrows until it opens into a small courtyard flanked by tall stone walls. You hear the faint echo of footsteps inside a great hall, slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Leonardo pushes open an enormous wooden door reinforced with crisscrossing iron bands. Inside, the hall expands like a cathedral, vast, cool, lined with towering arches. The ceiling rises so high that the light dissolves before it reaches the upper stonework. Only a few slanted windows allow strips of gold to cut through the dim air. But the walls, it's the walls that steal your breath. Leonardo guides you toward the far end of the hall, his footsteps echoing softly across the marble floor. There, on the broadest section of wall, lies a faint ghost of chaos, swirling shapes, violent motion, fragments of torsos, horses rearing, faces twisted in effort. It is a battlefield half-born, half-lost. Leonardo stops in front of it. This, he says quietly, was the beginning. You step closer. Some lines remain sharp, dark strokes cutting through plaster like scars in stone. Others fade so softly they seem like memories dissolving in the air. A central figure emerges if you look long enough. A cluster of mounted soldiers fighting for control of the standard, their horses biting, muscles tensed, expressions fierce with urgency. The Battle of Anghiari. Leonardo traces one of the faint outlines with his finger, the curve of a horse's jaw, the tension etched in the neck. I wanted, he says, to capture movement, not just bodies in motion, but the violence of intention. He steps aside so you can take it in. A historical fact emerges. Leonardo was commissioned in 1503 to paint the Battle of Anghiari in the Palazzo Vecchio, using an experimental fresco technique with oil and wax. The experiment failed. The pigments wouldn't set, and the masterpiece began melting from the wall before it was even complete. Leonardo touches a patch of discolored plaster. Heat, he murmurs. Too much heat. He leads you to the opposite side of the hall, where a large wooden scaffold once stood. Pieces of rope and pulleys still hang from beams that look untouched for decades. I try to dry it faster, he explains, with braziers. He pauses. It only softened the pigments. You imagine him here, frustrated, watching his creation drip downward in thin, tragic rivulets. He walks to a nearby table where surviving sketches lie. Furious horses roaring mid-charge, soldiers contorting with raw intensity, hands gripping weapons with clenched desperation. He lifts one of the sketches. The strokes are sharp, almost violent, so different from the softness of the Mona Lisa. In war, he says, there is no sfumato. He sets the drawing down gently. You trace the image of a horse rearing back, teeth bared, eyes wild. Leonardo watches you. Horses, he says, hold truth in their faces. More truth than men. He opens another folder of drawings. This one filled with studies of twisting torsos, arms straining, muscles tensed in pure physical struggle. It's startling how alive the figures feel. Your eccentric curiosity moment appears here. Leonardo was rumored to have watched soldiers spar in training yards and even dissembled horses to understand their muscular structures for the mural. Some accounts claim he drew animals in states of panic to study the extremes of motion. Leonardo turns back toward the massive, faded wall. He stands silently for a moment. Then he steps closer, lifting his hand toward an area where the plaster is nearly blank. Here, he says softly, was a man falling. He moves his hand slightly. Here, another reaching. A step to the left. And here, a horse screaming. He lowers his hand. The wall forgets, he whispers. There's your academic debate. For centuries, scholars have argued whether part of Leonardo's original work still exists beneath later frescoes painted over it, hidden but not destroyed. Some believe the surviving wall hides fragments of the masterpiece. Others insist it has disappeared entirely. Leonardo gives a small, knowing smile, almost mischievous. Some things, he says, vanish by design. You're not sure if he means he intentionally left parts unfinished, or if he accepts that some creations are meant to live only briefly. He steps to a corner of the hall where wooden models of horses and riders remain. He picks up a small model, a violently posed horse with flared nostrils and a twisted body. Motion is truth, he whispers. Stability is a lie. The horse model trembles faintly in his hand, as if the sculpted moment cannot stay still. He sets it down. People think the battle is about soldiers, he says. No, the battle is about movement. He walks back toward the wall and kneels, placing his palm against the stone. Do you hear it? He asks gently. You close your eyes. At first there is only silence. Then, a faint echo, a distant rumble, as if horses thunder through the plaster, frozen mid-charge, as if soldiers still roar in effort behind the faded strokes. Leonardo rises slowly. This hall, he murmurs, remembers what I try to do. He steps back toward you. I wanted to paint fury, he says. But fury doesn't hold still long enough. The light shifts through the high windows, illuminating the faded section of wall in a brief sweep of gold. For an instant, the shapes sharpen, just enough to feel alive. Then the light moves on. Leonardo watches the glow fade. Perhaps that is why, he whispers, the painting is gone. He walks toward the exit, footsteps echoing softly in the grand hall. Some works, he says, are meant to remain unfinished. Some truths unpinned. He reaches the door and looks back at the dissolving battlefield one last time. Come, he says gently. The world holds other mysteries. And as you step out into the Florentine air, leaving the ghostly mural behind, it feels like the battle continues inside the stone, alive eternal, and forever just out of reach. Leonardo guides you out of the Hall of Ghosts and down a quiet stone corridor that feels thick with history. You emerge into the open light again, but this time Florence feels different, less crowded, less hurried, as though the world is preparing you for something monumental. He leads you to the edge of the city, where the buildings thin out and the land opens into a gentle, grassy field bordered by olive groves. The afternoon sun warms your shoulders. A soft breeze carries the scent of rosemary and distant hearth smoke. And then you see it, not the horse itself, not the colossal beast that once stood here, but the space where it lived, where it towered above all who walked beneath it. Leonardo stands still, looking toward a large cleared area marked with wooden beams and the remains of scaffolding. Several massive clay molds rest nearby. Some cracked, some collapsed, some partly filled with old plaster fragments. This, he says softly, was my giant. You follow his gaze. Even in ruin, the scale is breathtaking. The molds are taller than men, shaped into enormous flanks, shoulders, and legs. Curved forms rise from the earth like the remains of a sleeping titan. This, Leonardo repeats, but with a note of tenderness, was Il Cavallo. You walk toward the largest mold. Its interior surface is shaped so precisely that you can imagine the bronze horse as it once stood in Leonardo's imagination. Massive, powerful, rearing slightly, a monument meant to honor the Duke of Milan. A historical fact surfaces gently. Leonardo worked for years on a colossal bronze horse, intended to be the largest equestrian statue in the world. He completed a giant clay model more than 7 meters tall, but war intervened before the bronze casting could be done. Soldiers used the clay horse for target practice, destroying it. Leonardo kneels beside a fallen mold, dusting sand from the surface. I learned much from this creature, he murmurs. Strength, weight, balance. He traces a line where the bronze would have flowed. And patience. He motions you forward, guiding you toward another piece, a massive horse's head, cracked in half like a relic. You run your fingers over the smooth interior. Leonardo's expression softens. The clay model, he says, stood for years. People came from far cities just to look at it. He closes his eyes briefly. They called it a miracle. He opens them again. But miracles, too, are fragile. He rises and walks toward a wooden structure at the far side of the field. It looks like an enormous sling, ropes and pulleys arranged around a circular platform. This was my casting pit, he explains. The bronze would have poured through channels here, here, and here. He points to several openings, and the molten metal would chase the shape. You imagine it, glowing rivers of bronze flowing into these molds, solidifying into the form of the colossal horse. But the bronze was never poured. War drained Milan's stores. The metal meant for the horse was used for cannons instead. Leonardo rests a hand on one of the wooden beams. I watched armies take the bronze, he says quietly. Bronze meant for beauty. Bronze meant for peace. He exhales slowly. Bronze that became weapons. There is no bitterness in his voice, only a sadness that feels centuries old. He takes you to a smaller, tent-like structure made of canvas. Inside are several sketches pinned to the walls. Detailed studies of horse anatomy, cross-sections of muscles, delicate adjustments to joints and proportions. One sketch catches your eye, a drawing of the horse rearing slightly, front legs raised, mane flowing in stylized waves. Leonardo notices your interest. A horse, he says, must appear alive even when still. He touches the sketch, movement frozen in stone. Then he picks up a small clay model from a table. It is about the size of a melon, perfectly formed, full of energy, with tendons and muscles sculpted in intricate detail. This, he says, is the first shape I made. Your eccentric curiosity comes here. Leonardo sculpted dozens of miniature clay horses before attempting the giant version, shaping and reshaping them to understand how weight should be distributed in such a large statue. Some of these tiny models still survive today. He sets the model down carefully. I thought, he says, that if I could master the small horse, the large one would obey. He smiles faintly at the memory. Then he walks to the edge of the field and points to a deep trench, long overgrown with grass. This, he explains, was where we prepared the clay. We mixed straw, water, sand, everything by foot. He presses his foot gently into the soft earth. Many footprints, he says, once lived here. You look across the field again. The ruins of the molds rise like broken architecture. The air feels heavy with vanished ambition. Leonardo turns toward you and folds his arms. There's something people misunderstand, he says. You wait. They think the horse failed. He shakes his head. No, the horse lived, even if only in clay. He walks slowly around the clearing. And clay, he says, is honest. He kneels, gathers a handful of dry earth, and lets it fall. Bronze endures, he murmurs. But clay teaches. He moves to one more structure, a collapsed wooden frame lying across the ground. You can see faint marks where ropes once held the massive clay horse upright while workers shaped it. This, he says softly, was where its heart beat. You feel something shift in your chest. Leonardo stands in silence for a long moment. The breeze moves gently through his hair. The field feels like a memory, vast, unfinished, and deeply human. This horse, he says finally, was a dream too large for its century. He gives a small, soft smile. But dreams, he adds, do not vanish. They migrate. He steps away from the ruined molds and looks toward the horizon. Someday, he whispers, someone will finish it. You know he is right, and history will prove him right. Centuries later, artists used his surviving sketches to recreate the massive bronze horse he once envisioned. Leonardo walks toward the path again. Come, he says quietly. This giant has rested long enough. And as you leave the field behind, you feel that the great horse still stands. In spirit, in sketches, in the dust beneath your feet. Unfinished but not lost. Leonardo leads you away from the quiet field of Il Cavallo, back toward the rolling hills that cradle Florence like a gentle hand. The air grows cooler as you ascend a small incline, and the sun softens into a warm amber glow. A faint breeze moves across the hillside, brushing through the cypress trees with a whispering sound like distant wings. He walks ahead of you with a particular energy, subtle but unmistakable, a lightness, a kind of restrained excitement. You follow him along a winding path until the trees part and reveal a large, secluded clearing. At first, it looks empty. Then your eyes adjust. Strange wooden frames lie scattered around the grass. Some resemble rib cages, others long, thin bones, and still others look like the skeletons of enormous wings. Feathers, hundreds of them, are tied in bundles or stitched into early prototypes of cloth panels. Leonardo steps into the clearing and turns toward you, his eyes bright. This, he whispers, is where I learned to envy birds. He kneels beside a large wooden frame shaped like a wing and brushes his hand along its curved structure. To fly, he says, you must first understand why you fall. He gestures for you to come closer. The wing is astonishing. Long wooden ribs bend gracefully from a central spine, wrapped in thin layers of linen coated in a resin-like substance. Along the edges, small loops are tied to leather straps that would fit across a person's shoulders and arms. You feel an odd tremor of exhilaration. It's not just a design. It's a possibility. Leonardo senses your breath tighten. Do not be afraid, he murmurs with a smile. I never jumped. You raise an eyebrow. He laughs softly. Not far, at least. He stands and leads you toward a larger structure, a wooden glider shaped like an enormous bat. The frame spreads wide across the clearing, casting a long shadow over the grass. This, he says, touching the central beam, is my great folly. A flying machine powered by the human body. You walk around it slowly. Two massive wings stretch outward, each covered in layered cloth panels like outstretched feathers. The upper part curves upward slightly, while the lower part dips down and a sweeping arc leather straps hang from the frame. 2 for the hands, 2 for the feet. It looks both brilliant and terribly impractical. Humans, Leonardo explains, do not possess the strength to fly by muscle alone. He shrugs gently. But I had to try. A historical fact settles into the moment. Leonardo designed numerous flying machines, ornithopters, gliders, rotating wings, parachutes, and even early helicopter concepts, centuries before aviation was possible. Though none achieved true flight, his work laid foundational principles of aerodynamics. Leonardo gestures toward a small hill overlooking the clearing. Once, he confessed, I brought one of these there. You blink. He points. A narrow footpath leads to a gentle slope. You imagine him, alone, carrying the contraption like a stubborn dream, standing at the edge of the hill. I wanted to feel, he whispers, whether the wind would welcome me. You ask if he jumped. He looks amused. Perhaps, he says, I fell with more curiosity than fear. He walks toward a different frame lying in the grass, a strange triangular shape with a long tail, like the silhouette of a giant kite. This, he continues, is the parachute. He lifts a corner of the cloth. It is made from linen sewn into a pyramid. I believe, he pauses, thinking, I believe a person could descend safely from any height. He lowers his voice. Historians still argue whether I ever tested it. There is your academic debate moment. Some scholars claim Leonardo built and tested a prototype parachute. Others argue he only theorized it. Centuries later, modern tests prove the design could work. Leonardo smiles faintly. I prefer mystery. He walks toward another set of sketches pinned to a board leaning against a tree. You approach slowly. The drawings are extraordinary. Sequences of wings in motion, airflow turbulence sketched as swirling lines, studies of birds mid-flight frozen in perfect anatomical accuracy. He points to one drawing. Birds, he says softly, do not beat their wings up and down. They twist them. He demonstrates with his hands, rotating his palms as if slicing through air. That is how they create lift. You study the sketch closely. Feathers splay outward in the downward stroke, then fold during the upward stroke. It is precise, elegant, completely intuitive, and yet invisible unless one truly watches. Leonardo turns to you with quiet intensity. Everything, he says, is hidden in movement. He leads you to a small perch overlooking the entire clearing. From here, the field of machines looks like an ossuary of wings, beautiful, haunting, full of longing. Leonardo sits on a flat rock and gazes upward. Above you, a hawk circles in the late afternoon sky. Its wings are steady, its glide effortless. Leonardo watches it with a mixture of envy and reverence. For years, he whispers, I studied them. I followed them. I sketched them by candlelight. I dreamed of sleeping with their wings in my arms. Your eccentric curiosity moment arrives here. Leonardo sometimes purchased birds in cages, not to keep, but to release, simply so he could observe their flight and give them back to the sky. Some say he whispered apologies to them as he let them go. Leonardo lies back on the rock, hands behind his head. I learned, he says, that flying is not about force. It is about surrender. You sit beside him, watching the hawk glide effortlessly. Leonardo points subtly. See the way it rides the warm air? No flapping, no effort. The sky lifts it like a mother lifts her child. You watch, mesmerized. He closes his eyes for a moment. I tried, he says softly. I truly tried. He stands and walks toward the edge of the clearing. I never flew, he admits, but I learned how wings wish to move. He looks back at the scattered machines, some broken, some elegant, all full of longing. And that, he says gently, was enough. As he walks away, the hawk cries out, a soft, distant call that echoes across the clearing like a blessing. Leonardo looks up, smiles, and whispers, Come. The day grows short, and together you leave behind the machines of impossible dreams, wings folded, waiting for a sky they never touched. Leonardo guides you down from the hillside, leaving the dreaming wings behind. The path curves gently toward the outskirts of Florence, where workshops grow quieter, homes stand farther apart, and the noise of commerce dissolves into the murmur of wind brushing against stone walls. He leads you to a modest stone building with a wooden sign carved into the shape of two interlocking gears. The sign sways slightly in the breeze, creaking in a soft, rhythmic pattern, as though even the doorframe keeps time. Leonardo pushes the door open. Inside, the air is cooler, darker, shaded by shelves stacked high with metal rods, springs, coiled wires, brass cogs, and wooden wheels. A single lantern flickers on a workbench, its flame dancing beside a spread of mechanical sketches. This is not the playful world of musical machines. This room feels older, more contemplative. Leonardo picks up a small brass wheel and rolls it gently across his fingers. Time, he says softly, is the quietest master. He sets the wheel down and walks deeper into the workshop. You notice a tall mechanism near the far wall, a wooden frame holding a series of gears descending in a precise cascade. A weighted stone hangs from a rope, slowly lowering, pulling the gears into motion. They turn with a soft, steady rhythm, like a calm heartbeat. Leonardo watches the movement with serene concentration. People think clocks measure time, he murmurs. But clocks do not measure. They translate. He taps the smallest gear. They take the invisible and give it form. You feel the ASMR hush settle over the room. Gears clicking, rope creaking, the slow descent of weight. A historical fact stirs gently. Leonardo studied clock mechanisms deeply, designing improved escapements, springs, and gear trains. His surviving sketches show some of the earliest ideas for precision timekeeping, anticipating innovations that would not appear in Europe for centuries. Leonardo gestures for you to follow him to another table where several small devices lie in pieces. One resembles a square box with a spring coiled inside like a sleeping serpent. Energy, he says, lifting the spring, is nothing more than patience. He winds it slightly. The metal tightens, humming faintly with potential. When released, he continues softly. Patience becomes motion. He sets the spring down carefully. Then he picks up a second object, a tiny wooden drum with notches carved along its edge. This, he says, drives rhythm. For small automata, for instruments, even for toys. He spins it lightly. The faint clicking of the notches sounds like distant footsteps on stone. You watch, entranced. Leonardo moves toward another workbench where a large circular plate sits, engraved with delicate inscriptions and surrounded by small rotating discs. This, he explains, is an astronomical wheel, to track the wandering of the planets. You run your finger along the engraved symbols, small suns, crescents, stars. Leonardo adjusts one of the discs with gentle precision. You see, he whispers, the heavens keep their own time. He pauses, then adds, and we attempt to follow. Your academic debate moment emerges here. Scholars still dispute whether Leonardo intended to build a fully functional astronomical clock or whether these diagrams were exploratory, part of his fascination with celestial mechanics. Some say he sought to measure cosmic cycles. Others believe he used astronomy to refine earthly machines. He opens a drawer and removes a long strip of parchment. On it, a bizarre and elegant diagram of interlocking wheels nested inside one another, rotating at different speeds. This, he says, is the differential. You blink. He nods softly. Yes, I studied how two motions, unequal, could be combined to create a new motion. This concept, unknown in his era, anticipates the differential gear used in modern vehicles. He rests the parchment on the table. Movement, he says, is a language. I listen to what it wishes to say. He leads you toward the center of the workshop where a strange device hangs from the ceiling. A pendulum-like structure with a long arm at the top and a large disc at the bottom. Leonardo touches the arm. This is for studying oscillation, the swing of weight, the balance of time. He gives the disc a tiny push. It sways slowly, silently. Watch. The motion is hypnotic, steady, constant, certain. Leonardo folds his arms. The pendulum, he says, has much to teach us. You sense a peculiar warmth in his tone. Not pride, but gratitude. He turns away and leads you to a corner of the workshop where smaller, stranger devices lie. A tiny mechanical spider that crawls in stiff, amusing motions. A miniature drum attached to a walking frame, a self-turning spit for roasting meat, a clockwork toy shaped like a lion's head. Your eccentric curiosity lands here. Leonardo built clever devices for court entertainment, including automated animals and self-operating household tools. One famous design was a mechanical cart that moved without being pushed, one of the earliest self-propelled machines. He picks up a small brass lion's head. When you wind it, he says its jaw opens. He demonstrates. The jaw opens with a soft click, then closes again. Leonardo sets it down gently. Even the smallest motion, he whispers, contains meaning. He moves toward another mechanism, a box with a row of thin slats along its top. This, he says, records time through shadow. He lights a candle and places it beside the device. As the flame flickers, the slats cast shifting lines of shadow onto a parchment marked with hours. Leonardo smiles faintly. The sun, he murmurs, is the greatest clockmaker. He extinguishes the candle with a soft breath. The room grows dim again. Leonardo stands still, listening to the faint ticking of the hanging weights. You close your eyes. The gears sound like distant rain on rooftops. Steady, comforting, endlessly patient. Leonardo speaks quietly. Time, he says, is not the enemy. You open your eyes. He turns toward you. It is the companion, always present, always moving, always whispering. He steps to the door, leaving the gears turning gently behind him. Come, he says. There are more movements in this world than gears can count. As you step outside, the sunlight feels different, slower, warmer, softened by the rhythm of the workshop lingering in your mind. Time hasn't changed, but you have. Leonardo leads you through quieter Florentine streets now, far from the clang of hammers and the chorus of merchants. The light has softened further into late afternoon gold, brushing gently along stone walls. The city seems to exhale. He walks with a deeper stillness, as if preparing you for something solemn. Soon you arrive at a low, unmarked doorway tucked between two tall buildings. Leonardo pauses with his hand on the latch. Inside, the air is cooler, thicker, almost reverent. He closes the door behind you. The room is dim, with narrow windows set high in the walls, letting in only thin streams of light. A long wooden table stretches through the center, covered with layers of parchment showing detailed sketches. Muscles peeled back in elegant spirals, bones rendered with uncanny clarity, veins branching like delicate trees. This is not a workshop. This is an anatomical chapel. Leonardo steps forward, placing both hands on the edge of the table. To understand life, he murmurs, you must follow it to the threshold of stillness. You walk beside him and look at the drawings. The artistry steals your breath. These studies are not cold or clinical. They feel almost tender, as if he drew with respect rather than detachment. He lifts a page showing the human spine, each vertebra shaped with careful precision. The spine, he says softly, is a cathedral of pillars. He picks up another page, this one a hand dissected layer by layer, tendons drawn like harp strings. And the hand, he continues, is a miracle of tension. A historical fact rises. Leonardo performed extensive dissections, human and animal, studying over 30 bodies across hospitals, crypts, and medical facilities. His anatomical drawings were centuries ahead of their time, revealing structures no one had mapped before. Leonardo moves toward a narrow wooden cabinet against the wall. He opens it slowly. Inside are more sketches, hearts spiraling with rhythmic curves, cross-sections of skulls, lungs branching like river systems. He pulls out one sheet and sets it before you. The heart's ventricles, drawn with breathtaking accuracy. He traces the swirling pattern near the center. Blood, he whispers, moves in a vortex. This insight, lost for centuries, was rediscovered by modern medicine only recently. He closes the cabinet gently. Then he gestures toward another corner of the room, where several tools lie neatly arranged. Knives with thin, curved blades, small saws, delicate hooks. He touches one of the tools with a fingertip, not lifting it. People think these bring death, he murmurs. but used with care, they reveal life. He steps back to the table. The room feels profoundly quiet. No wind, no voices from outside. Only the soft cadence of his words. Leonardo spreads out a new set of parchment sheets, each showing layers of facial muscles, how the lips fold, where tension gathers during emotion. You recognize the shapes immediately, echoes of the expressions he painted so masterfully. The face, he says, is the theater of the soul. His voice lowers, but the soul moves muscles first. Your eccentric curiosity moment arrives when he opens a small chest beneath the table. Inside, preserved only crudely, are animal organs, hearts of pigs, lungs of goats, a cow's trachea carefully sliced to show its structure. Leonardo smiles faintly at your surprise. Human bodies, he says, are not always available. But nature, in her curiosity, repeats designs. He removes a pig's heart and sets it beside the drawing of a human heart. See, he says softly, a different creature, but the same conversation. He returns the organ respectfully to the box and closes the lid. He walks to the far end of the room where an enormous parchment hangs pinned across the entire wall, a full-length study of the human body shown in 3 layers: surface, musculature, and skeleton. It is overwhelming. The detail, the devotion, the reverence. You step closer. Leonardo stands behind you, hands folded behind his back. The body, he whispers, is the world's most perfect machine. He steps beside you and points toward the ribcage. These are vaults. He moves his finger upward. This is a bridge. He touches the hip bone. And this a hinge. He stops at the heart. And here is the engine. Silence gathers around the two of you like a cloak. Then he walks slowly toward a small window where the light is faintest. Scholars, he says, claim to know the seat of the soul. There is your academic debate moment. In Leonardo's time, scholars fiercely argued whether the soul resided in the heart, the brain, the lungs, or in no physical place at all. Leonardo's own views evolved, sometimes believing the heart's motion held the secret, sometimes convinced the brain's ventricles were the source. Scholars still debate his final position. Leonardo watches the dust drift in the window's beam. The truth, he says softly, is that we do not know. He returns to the table and picks up a sketch showing the human skull with its cavities revealed. Perhaps, he murmurs, the soul is movement. Or perhaps it is breath. He sets the page down. Then he takes a deep breath, slow, thoughtful, almost sacred, and steps away from the table. Let me show you something, he says. He moves to another drawer and removes a set of pages layered like a flipbook. He holds them against the window, so light glows through the parchment. You step closer. He lifts the first page. A skull. The next page. Muscle forms appear. The next. More muscles. The next. Skin. The next. A face. Gentle. Human. He lowers the pages. This, he says, is how I learned to see. You feel your breath shallow in the quiet. Leonardo rolls up the layered drawings and ties them carefully. He steps toward the exit, opening the door just slightly. Warm air spills into the anatomical chapel. Come, he whispers. We have looked long enough inside. And as you walk out, the room behind you feels less like a study of death and more like a shrine to understanding. A place where Leonardo learned that life is architecture, motion, mystery, and that the human body is a map drawn by nature in her own hand. Leonardo steps back into the warm, late afternoon air, closing the anatomical chamber behind him with a soft thud. For a moment, he simply breathes, long, slow, as though cleansing himself from the silence of the room you just left. Then he gestures for you to follow him toward a broad path leading out of Florence, toward the open plains. The sky overhead has turned a deeper gold, the sun slanting low. The fields shimmer with it. It feels like the day itself is lengthening, stretching time for you, giving room for the next revelation. Leonardo guides you toward a cluster of wooden sheds set apart from the city. Workers move quietly inside them, polishing metal plates, sawing planks, lifting beams. But they do so without urgency, like people maintaining a garden rather than constructing engines of destruction. This place, Leonardo says softly, is where dreams wrestle. You step inside one of the sheds. The interior is wide and open, filled with large wooden frameworks resembling giant rib cages. They hang from rafters or lie arranged on the floor, like the skeletons of strange creatures. Some resemble spinning wheels, others look like the bodies of ships, and still others feel like proto-tanks, angular, armored, forbidding. Leonardo touches one of these frames lovingly. "I designed this for the Duke of Milan," he murmurs. "My armored vehicle. It is not the same shell you saw earlier, the one built from curved wooden planks and cannon slits. This one is smaller, but more refined." It appears as though he returned to it later, adjusting lines, softening angles, improving the geometry. He lifts a panel to show you the interior, tight, elegant, almost claustrophobic. "Protection," he whispers. "Protection for men who march too near the jaws of war." The panels are reinforced by iron crossbeams, strong, yet light, designed to deflect projectiles without collapsing inward. He closes the panel gently. "But war," he says, turning his back to the machine, "tries to eat everything." You follow him as he climbs a small ladder to a loft. Here, sketches cover every surface. Designs for cannon carriages, mobile bridges, giant crossbows that could hurl massive bolts across impossible distances. Then he picks up one sheet from the pile. "This was a trebuchet," he explains, pointing to counterweights drawn with meticulous detail. "But not an ordinary one." He taps the illustration of a peculiar multi-arm system. This one was meant to fire repeatedly, with minimal reset." He lowers his gaze, almost ashamed. "I know what you are thinking." You remain quiet. He folds the parchment reverently and returns it to the table. A historical fact emerges. Leonardo offered the Duke of Milan an impressive portfolio of war machines when seeking employment: bridge-destroying devices, cannons, fortifications, armored vehicles. But he always claimed his purpose was to end war through overwhelming deterrence, not to perpetuate it. Leonardo descends the ladder and leads you outside to the calm fields where long wooden beams lie arranged in geometric patterns along the grass. He steps into the center of one of these shapes. "This," he says, "is geometry for peace." You blink. He kneels and shows you how the beams form a rigid lattice, triangles feeding into hexagons, distributing weight perfectly. "A stable bridge," he says, "that soldiers could build in an hour." He stands and walks toward another pattern in the field. And here, the beams form a curved shape, almost like a ribbed shell, a shelter against artillery. He brushes dust from his hands. "These," he murmurs, "are machines for life." You feel the shift. This is not the heart of a warmonger. This is the mind of someone trying to protect those doomed to suffer. Leonardo leads you toward a shed where water trickles faintly. Inside lies a strange object, half machine, half sculpture. A wooden frame holds two large water wheels connected by a gear train. The wheels turn lazily as water flows beneath them. Leonardo dips his fingers into the stream. "A machine," he says softly, "that purifies water." He lifts the gears slightly, so you can see the finer mechanism underneath. Filter sieves fine mesh. "For soldiers," he adds. "For travelers. For villages without clean rivers." He looks up at you with quiet intensity. "You see, even in war, there is room for mercy." Your eccentric curiosity moment arrives when he opens a cabinet near the back of the shed. Inside is a long tube filled with tiny wooden arrows and a hand crank at its end. A rapid-fire dart launcher. He notices your expression and sighs. "Sometimes princes want spectacle," he says, "and I give them spectacle." He turns the crank lightly. A small arrow pops out with a comically small thip. Leonardo laughs softly. "It is harmless," he says, "but it entertains." He closes the cabinet. Not every machine needs to hurt. He leads you toward the final shed. This one is larger, darker, with a cool stillness inside. At the center stands a massive wooden drum attached to a complex crank system. Chains hang from its sides like muscular tendons. Leonardo sets his hand on the drum. Do you know what this is? You shake your head slowly. It is a machine for rolling stones. He touches the frame gently. For building, not breaking. He walks around it. For lifting blocks into place with minimal effort. To raise walls, arches, domes. To build sanctuaries, aqueducts, houses, cities. He pats the structure affectionately. A machine that breathes life into architecture. He steps back, surveying his own creation with a mixture of pride and melancholy. Some men build machines to destroy cities, he whispers. I build them to lift stones. Then he steps outside and motions for you to follow him into the open field once more. The light is now turning orange. Long shadows stretch across the grass. Leonardo stands still, the breeze brushing gently through his hair. I have lived, he says, among princes who love war. He looks down at his hands. And yet these hands, he lifts them slightly, delicate, stained with ink, calloused in places. These hands were made to build. He gazes across the scattered machines, some for destruction, some for salvation. People will talk of my war machines, he says softly, but they will not understand that each of them carries a quiet plea inside. He closes his eyes, a plea for peace. He walks away from the field slowly. Come, he whispers, we are not finished. Leonardo walks with you into the deeper glow of the late evening, where the sky has begun to soften into rose and silver. Florence fades behind the hills, and the world grows quieter, gentler. Only the rhythmic crunch of your footsteps on the road remains. He doesn't speak for a while. Then, as you crest a small rise, he gestures toward a distant building, long, rectangular, humble in appearance, yet somehow resonant. A monastery. The walk toward it is slow and steady, as if he needs you to feel the approach, not just see the destination. When you reach the entrance, he pushes the wooden door gently, and it opens without a sound. Inside, cool stone corridors swallow the outside world. The air smells faintly of aged plaster and candle smoke. Leonardo guides you to a refectory, an elongated hall with wooden benches lining each side. The room is dim, lit only by scattered candles and the last scraps of daylight spilling through high windows. He stops in the center of the hall and lets his gaze drift upward and across the far wall. You follow his eyes, and there it is, a long table, 13 men, a moment suspended between breath and revelation. The Last Supper, but not as it once was. The colors are faded, soft as old memory. Parts of the wall flake away, revealing blank plaster underneath. The faces are still luminous, hauntingly expressive, but fragile, as though existing only in borrowed time. Leonardo stands before it silently for several seconds. Then he whispers, I did not paint this to decorate a wall. He steps closer. I painted it to reveal the moment a soul breaks open. You move beside him. The details begin to emerge. The tilt of a head, the tension in a hand, the barely subdued tremor of conflict and disbelief. Every figure reacts differently to the words that have just been spoken in the scene. One of you will betray me. Leonardo raises a hand and points toward the central figure. Christ sits in calm resignation, isolated not by distance, but by stillness. Around him, the apostles erupt in waves of emotion. This, Leonardo says, is how truth moves. A historical fact surfaces. Leonardo abandoned the traditional fresco technique and instead used dry plaster with layers of tempera, which allowed incredible detail, but made the work tragically fragile. Within his own lifetime, parts of the mural began to deteriorate. Leonardo touches the air just inches from the surface. I wanted softness, he says. Flesh, not stone. Sorrow, not paint. He lowers his hand. It cost me the painting. You take in the fading colors, the cracks, the peeling edges. The scene is beautiful and broken, precise and dissolving at the same time. Your eyes drift toward a cluster of hands in the center of the table. Multiple gestures interwoven like a conversation made of muscles. Leonardo notices your focus. The hands, he says softly, carry the truth the mouths cannot speak. He moves toward John, whose head tilts gently toward Christ. People argue, he whispers, whether this is John or someone else. He gives you a quiet, knowing smile. There is your academic debate. Scholars have argued for centuries whether the youthful figure beside Christ is the Apostle John or Mary Magdalene. The flowing hair, delicate features, and serene posture fuel the discussion endlessly. Leonardo merely shrugs, offering no answer. He steps back and looks at Peter, a figure leaning forward, his expression a blend of anger and disbelief. Emotion, Leonardo says, is architecture. Then he gestures toward Judas, the only apostle whose face remains in shadow, clutching his small purse of silver. I place him on the same side of the table. Leonardo says quietly. No one had done that before. You feel a faint shiver. It's bold, dangerously bold for his time. He continues. I wanted to show. He searches for the right word. The moment when a man becomes aware of what he has done. Your eccentric curiosity moment arrives when Leonardo kneels briefly to inspect the lower corner of the mural, specifically a small blue robe lightly outlined. He smiles. I had a subtle sketch of my own face there, he admits softly, not as pride but as witness. A hidden self-portrait, very faint, nearly lost to time, yet still part of the mural. He stands again. People will argue, he says, whether it is truly me. Let them. He steps back from the wall and takes in the whole scene, from the gentle tilt of Christ's head to the synchronized shock rippling outward in human waves. This room, he whispers, was once full of monks eating in silence. The painting was meant to keep them company. He turns toward you, and now it keeps you. A breeze drifts through the high window, and the candle flames dance. For a moment, the entire mural seems to breathe, its shadows deepening, its highlights shimmering. Leonardo rests his hand on the wooden bench. You see, he murmurs, I did not want to paint holiness. I wanted to paint humanity. You study the expressions again. Fear, sorrow, confusion, betrayal, hope. These figures are not saints. They are men, flawed and fragile. Leonardo steps toward the wall until he is nearly touching it, his voice lowering. A masterpiece, he says, is not the perfection of color or line. It is the perfection of truth. He walks toward the exit, but pauses at the doorway. When you look at this painting, do not look for technique. His voice softens into warm, sleep-like cadence. Look for the breath. Look for the heartbeat. Look for the moment that strangers become brothers. He pushes the door open. A slant of fading sunlight spills across the floor. Come, he whispers. This day has another secret yet. And as you leave the refectory, you feel the mural linger behind you. A masterpiece fading, breaking, enduring, like memory itself. Leonardo leads you out of the monastery and into the cooling twilight. The air feels different now, lighter, almost expectant, as if something unseen is waiting just beyond the next turn in the road. He walks with a soft, steady stride, heading uphill toward a small rise overlooking the Arno Valley. The sky deepens into purples and drifting silver clouds. Fireflies begin flickering in the grass, tiny floating sparks marking the transition from day to night. Leonardo looks upward. Tonight, he whispers, you will see the world the way I learned to see it. He guides you toward a low stone building perched at the hill's crest. Its door is open, lantern light glowing warmly from within. Inside, the room is filled with maps, hundreds of them, hanging from walls stacked on tables, overlapping in layers like geological strata. Some are wide panoramic sweeps of landscapes. Others are meticulous winding lines marking rivers, valleys, and mountains. Still others show entire regions drawn in crisp, mathematical perspective. Leonardo steps to the center table, where a massive sheet of parchment lies weighted at the corners with smooth stones. This, he says softly, is the Arno. You lean in. The river curls across the page like a serpent made of ink, measured precisely, with swirling eddies sketched near the bends, gentle contour lines marking the surrounding hills. He touches the curves lightly. Men draw maps from the ground, he murmurs. But I wanted to see from the sky. You feel a quiet shiver. From the sky. Centuries before flight, Leonardo retrieved a wooden frame from a shelf, an early viewing grid, a lattice of tiny square windows. I walk the hills, he says, holding this before my eyes. He smiles at the memory. Piece by piece, the world surrendered its shape. He lifts the grid so you can peer through it. Each square isolates a tiny portion of the landscape, just enough to understand its slope, angle, shadows. It turns the world into manageable fragments of truth. A historical fact comes alive. Leonardo created aerial perspective maps long before humans could fly. His bird's-eye drawings of the Arno Valley are so accurate that modern cartographers still marvel at how he achieved such precision. Leonardo sets the grid down gently. Then he walks to another table, where an enormous map sprawls across the wood like a sleeping creature. This one, he says, belongs to Imola. The map is extraordinary, drawn almost as though the town were flattened and opened like the petals of a flower. Streets are straight and clean. Buildings are crisp. The city walls feel almost architectural. Leonardo places a hand on its edge. I walked every street, he confides, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times. You look at him in astonishment. You do not trust memory, he says calmly. I trust measurement. He points toward a faint annotation in the corner. I counted paces, every single one. Your eccentric curiosity moment rises here. Leonardo allegedly carried a small measuring tool, something like a primitive pedometer, to record distance while walking. Some say he invented it. Others believe he improvised one from gears. Either way, he measured the world with footsteps. Leonardo takes a charcoal stick and draws a tiny correction on one of the streets. Not enough to alter the structure, but enough to perfect an angle. A map, he whispers, is a conversation with distance. He then guides you to the far wall, where a very different map hangs, one drawn with swirling curves, dotted lines, and almost poetic annotations. This, he says, is the map of deluges. You look closer. It depicts floods, water rushing through valleys, surging over riverbanks. Arrows show the motion of swirling currents. Notes in mirror writing speculate about how rivers carve earth, how mountains crumble into plains over ages. Leonardo folds his arms gently. People think maps measure land, he murmurs. But land moves. Water moves. Everything moves. Your academic debate moment emerges. Scholars still argue whether Leonardo's flood maps were scientific predictions, allegorical studies, or preparation for some grand engineering project. Some believe he intended to redirect the Arno River to change Florence's economic power. Others say the maps were philosophical, studies of nature's violence and transformation. He touches one swirling line. Water, he says, is the world's handwriting. He steps away from the wall and gestures for you to follow him to another part of the room. There, a smaller parchment lies on a tilted desk. It shows mountains drawn from an impossible height, like clouds drifting above stone. Leonardo's gaze softens. I climb peaks, he says, to see what the birds see. You imagine him standing on some Tuscan ridge, wind pushing his hair, sketchbook in hand, noting the tilt of a valley, the angle of morning light. He kneels beside a drawer and pulls out a handful of small wooden models, tiny pyramids, cubes, and spheres. I use these, he says, to understand shadow. He places a small cube beneath the lantern. The shadow falls at a clean diagonal. Light shapes the world, he murmurs. Maps must shape light. He turns the cube slightly. The shadow jumps, shifts, lengthens. And so, he says, the world changes on paper. You watch the shifting geometries with a gentle drift of calm. Leonardo walks to the window and opens the shutters. Night has fully arrived. Stars burn quietly across the sky. He looks at them with awe. Above us, he says, another map. He lifts his hand and traces an imaginary arc between the constellations. Men draw lines across the heavens to find meaning, he says. But I draw the heavens to understand the earth. He pauses, letting the cool air fill the room. The sky teaches scale, he whispers, and the earth teaches detail. He turns back toward the tables, toward the maps of rivers, cities, floods, mountains. All of these, he says softly, are fragments of truth. He rolls up the Emolam map carefully, ties it with twine, and places it inside a leather case. As long as the world moves, he says, we must keep learning how to draw it. Then he picks up a blank sheet of parchment and rests it silently in the center of the table. Come, he murmurs. This world has more shapes to reveal. And as you follow him out into the cool night, you feel as though you've been lifted, just slightly, into the air above the earth, where rivers, hills, and cities arrange themselves into meaning. Leonardo walks with you deeper into the night, the cool air brushing gently across your face, carrying the scent of olive leaves and distant smoke. The sky above is velvet and star-washed, and the fields seem quieter now, as if they know that what comes next belongs not to noise, but to illumination. He leads you toward a small stone building sitting alone near a cluster of cypresses. From the outside, it looks like nothing, an abandoned shed, a forgotten storeroom. But Leonardo pushes the door open with a quiet kind of anticipation, and warm candlelight pours into the darkness around your feet. Inside, the space is arranged like a stage, but not a stage for actors, a stage for light. The room is filled with objects that seem ordinary at first glance. Curved mirrors, polished metal plates, glass spheres, wax candles, wooden shutters, painted screens, angled boards. Yet everything is placed with precision, as though choreographed for a silent performance. Leonardo steps inside and gestures for you to follow. This, he whispers, is my theater. He picks up a small metal mirror and turns it slowly. A beam of candlelight catches the polished surface and leaps across the room like a living thing, glowing against a wall. Leonardo tilts the mirror. The beam jumps again, landing now on a wooden panel painted with soft, blurred shapes. This, he says, is the first lesson. He moves the mirror again. The world does not need to be bright to be seen. He steps aside and leaves the reflection dancing. A historical fact settles softly. Leonardo studied optics obsessively, light, shadow, refraction, perspective, and wrote countless pages exploring how the eye perceives shape and depth. His notes contain early discoveries about how light scatters, diffuses, and shifts across distance, anticipating fields of optical science centuries later. Leonardo walks toward a larger apparatus sitting on a tripod. It resembles a strange wooden box with a small circular hole in the front. He lifts a panel and opens the back of the device. Inside is a faint projection of the candlelit room, inverted and ghostly. He tilts the device so the image sharpens. You gasp softly. The camera obscura. Leonardo smiles at your reaction. Light, he whispers, paints the world without hands. He adjusts the panel gently. When I look through this, he says, I see not objects, but the truth of how things appear. You kneel to study the inverted image. The candle's flame becomes a trembling teardrop. Leonardo's silhouette appears upside down, elongated, otherworldly. He crouches beside you. The eye, he murmurs, is its own camera. He lifts a sheet of parchment covered in diagrams, cones of light, angles of refraction, rays bouncing from surfaces. Sight is geometry, he says, but emotion is shadow. He moves toward the far wall, where canvas is mounted, half-painted, untouched for years but perfectly preserved. It shows a woman's face emerging from shadow, soft edges, gentle motion, contours dissolving into darkness. Sfumato. He doesn't say the word. He doesn't need to. He brushes his hand near the canvas. I learned that truth does not have sharp lines. He lifts a candle and moves it slowly to one side. The shadows on the painted face shift, depth appearing, then dissolving. Light, he says, breathes. He walks toward a glass sphere resting on a pedestal. Inside it, the candle's reflection multiplies. One flame, then 3, then 5, dancing like fireflies caught in crystal. Leonardo places the sphere between you and the candle. The world bends, he whispers, when seen through clarity. He rotates the sphere slowly, and the reflections inside swirl like tiny galaxies. Your eccentric curiosity moment appears now. Leonardo was fascinated by glass spheres and polished lenses. He sketched dozens of them, studying how light curves within them. Some believe he experimented with primitive magnifying lenses or even early telescopic concepts. Whether true or not, he clearly felt an affinity for the way glass plays with illumination. Leonardo sets the sphere down with reverence. Then he leads you toward a stack of painted panels leaning against the wall. He pulls one out. It is an illusion, a flat board painted to look like a deep, arched hallway. When viewed straight on, it becomes dimensional, as though you could walk into it. When viewed from the side, it collapses into distortion. Leonardo watches you study it. Perspective, he murmurs, is the most delicate deception. He taps the edge of the board. What you see depends on where you stand. He steps back, letting you observe the shifting illusion. Then he kneels on the floor and lights a candle beneath a small rotating model, something like a miniature planetarium. As the gears turn, cutouts begin to cast spiraling shadows across the walls. Stars, waves, arches of light that stretch and twist in slow motion. The whole room becomes a quiet cosmos. Leonardo sits cross-legged on the floor, simply watching the shadows move. I wanted, he says barely above a whisper, to understand how the world changes when no one is looking. His gaze drifts upward to the moving patterns. Light, he continues, reveals the truth, but shadow reveals the story. You sit beside him, letting the slow spirals settle in your mind like a lullaby. The movement is hypnotic, calm, patient, dreamlike. After a long pause, Leonardo rises and walks toward a paper pinned to the wall by a simple nail. You follow. The page shows a single eye, meticulously drawn. Iris detailed, reflection studied, eyelid mapped with precision. People believe, he says softly, that the eye sees everything. He shakes his head gently. No, the eye sees only what light permits. He lifts the page and places it carefully into a wooden box. Scholars, he murmurs, still argue whether light travels outward from the eye or inward to the eye. There is your academic debate moment. In Leonardo's time, the nature of light was fiercely disputed, some claiming light emanated from the eye, others that the eye received light. Leonardo rejected the ancient extramission theory and argued that light enters the eye from the world. Scholars still debate how far ahead of his era his understanding truly was. He closes the box quietly. Then he blows out the rotating candle. The room falls gently back into stillness. Leonardo stands in the remaining candlelight. Light, he says, is a poet. Shadow is its punctuation. He walks toward the door, pausing as his hand rests lightly on the wooden latch. Come, he whispers. We have watched the dance long enough. And as you step outside into the cool night, the stars above seem brighter, as though the world itself has been freshly illuminated from within. Leonardo leads you away from the small theater of light, and for a while you walk in comfortable silence. The night air has cooled, carrying the faint smell of grass, river water, and distant wood smoke. Somewhere in the valley, an owl calls, soft, echoing, solitary. As you continue along the winding path, the landscape around you begins to shift. Florence melts away from your imagination, replaced by something greener, gentler, almost dreamlike. You feel the change before you see it. Leonardo pauses at the top of a low hill. He looks out across a broad stretch of moonlit countryside, rolling fields, hedges, and clusters of trees arranged like careful brushstrokes. France, he whispers, though you know you have not physically traveled. But this journey is not about distance measured in footsteps. It is measured in memory. He leads you forward, and the gently sloping gardens of Amboise appear, orderly, elegant, quiet beneath the stars. Stone pathways wind between trimmed hedges. Small fountains murmur softly in the dark. The Chateau d'Amboise rises nearby, dignified but not imposing, lit faintly from within by warm touches of candlelight. Leonardo smiles softly. "This," he murmurs, "is where I grew old." You follow him through one of the garden paths. His steps are slower now, not weak, not hesitant, but contemplative, like someone revisiting a beloved chapter long after closing the book. He brings you to a small, beautifully kept house standing beside the gardens. Walls of gentle stone, windows framed with climbing vines. Clos loose. He opens the door and lets you step inside. The room is simple, warm, and full of objects arranged in quiet harmony. Sketchbooks stacked neatly, models hanging from beams, gears and pulleys scattered with intention, as if each object waits patiently for its master's hands. Leonardo walks to a large table near the window, where moonlight spills across dozens of notebooks. He rests his fingertips on their covers. "I wrote more in these years," he says softly, "than in all my youth." He opens one of the notebooks. The sketches inside are extraordinary. Bridges, waterworks, mechanical devices, mathematical studies, and gentle drawings of human expressions. But something else stands out. The lines are calmer, more spacious, less frantic. "My hand," he says, "learned patience." A historical fact settles in the room. In his final years, Leonardo lived under the patronage of King Francis I of France, who admired him deeply. Leonardo served as premier painter and engineer and architect to the king, though he completed few large works due to age and health. Instead, he focused on refining ideas, tutoring, and conceptual inventions. Leonardo closes the notebook and moves to a cabinet on the far side of the room. Inside are small wooden models, beautifully carved, delicate, slightly whimsical. He removes one shaped like a rotating bridge. "This," he says, "folds and unfolds with a single motion. Soldiers can cross rivers in moments." He sets it aside. Another model emerges, a mechanical lion with hidden gears inside its chest. When wound, he says, it walks forward and opens its heart. He places it gently on the table. "A gift for the king." Your eccentric curiosity moment arrives here. Leonardo presented a mechanical lion to King Francis I. Historical accounts claim it could walk forward and reveal lilies, France's royal emblem, inside its chest. Whether myth or truth, the legend persists. Leonardo opens yet another drawer. This time, he takes out architectural sketches, vast domes, swirling staircases, bridges arched like the skeletons of whales. "These," he says, "were dreams." He lays them out on the table. "I wanted to build cities shaped by ease, not by fear." His fingertip traces the curvature of an enormous spiral ramp, and structures that breathe. He leaves the sketches there, glowing softly in the moonlight. Then he walks to a high shelf and retrieves a small stack of folded papers. "These," he says quietly, "are the designs I never finished." He exhales gently, because life does not give us time enough. He unfolds the pages. Some drawings are clear, others incomplete, half-finished lines that fade into blank space. He smiles. "There is beauty in unfinished things," he murmurs. Outside, a night breeze brushes through the garden, rustling the vines along the walls. The sound is delicate, almost like the turning of pages. Leonardo moves to the window and gazes out over the moonlit hedges. "The king," he says softly, "would visit me here. We spoke of philosophy, of nature, of the shape of dreams." His voice grows tender. "He called me his father." Your academic debate moment emerges now. Historians still argue about the exact nature of the relationship between Leonardo and King Francis I. Some describe it as paternal and affectionate. Others see it as symbolic, political, or ritualized. Letters are few, records incomplete, and interpretations vary widely. But all accounts agree the king held Leonardo in profound esteem. Leonardo's gaze softens further. "Respect," he whispers, "a rare gift." He steps away from the window and returns to the center of the room, where the soft glow of lantern light blends with moonlight, illuminating his features with gentle depth. He gestures toward a chair. Sit, he says kindly. You sit. Leonardo takes his place beside the table, resting his hands lightly on its surface. He looks around the room, at the sketches, the models, the quiet harmony of invention. I did not come to France to escape Italy, he says. I came here to rest. He lifts one of the models, a gentle design for a water wheel, and turns it slowly between his fingers. Even in rest, he murmurs, the mind continues. He sets it down. Then he looks at you with a soft, steady expression, an expression carrying years of thought, years of curiosity, years of gentle longing. Creation, he whispers, does not stop with age. It only changes shape. The candle near the window flickers. The last whisper of daylight slips away. Leonardo moves to the door, opens it slightly, and lets the cool night air breathe into the room. Come, he says. There is still one more place I wish to show you. And as you step outside with him, the gardens rustle like the soft turning of time itself. The final chapter of a life lived in wonder. Leonardo leads you deeper into the midnight gardens of Amboise. The air has cooled into a gentle hush, soft, fragrant, touched by dew. Stone pathways glimmer faintly under the moon, and the leaves overhead stir with a sound like distant paper rustling. He walks slowly, deliberately, as if guiding you toward a truth he has waited a lifetime to reveal. Eventually, he stops beside a low stone bench near a solitary cypress tree. He sits. You sit beside him. For a long while, neither of you speak. The night is vast, patient, and unhurried, like a canvas waiting for the first stroke. Finally, Leonardo exhales softly. I wrote, he whispers, so the world would remember what I learned. He looks at his hands, ink-stained, gentle, tired. But I never imagined how far my pages would travel. He gestures toward the darkness, with a faint outline of the Loire River glints. When I died, he says, my notebooks scattered. His voice is neither sad nor bitter, merely factual, like someone recounting something inevitable. A historical fact rises quietly. Leonardo left behind thousands of pages, sketches, diagrams, studies, philosophical reflections, but they were not kept together. After his death, they dispersed through students, collectors, kings, scholars, and private libraries. Many vanished. Some resurfaced centuries later. Leonardo folds his hands. My students kept some, he murmurs. Others sold pages to nobles. Others simply forgot. He smiles softly. The world was not ready. You sense something heavy beneath the words. Not regret, but a profound acceptance. Leonardo reaches into the folds of his robe and removes a tiny sketch, weathered, edges frayed. It shows a simple spiral. The world, he says, loves stories. But my work is not a story. He places the sketch gently on your palm. It is a map. He stands, beckoning you to follow him along a narrow garden path lined with herbs, sage, lavender, rosemary. As you walk, he speaks again. My pages traveled farther than I ever could. He stops near a stone archway covered in ivy and lifts his hand. And centuries later, he says, people began to gather them again. You step under the archway. The space beyond transforms. No longer a garden, but a vast, moonlit hall formed of imagination and memory. Parchment pages float in slow spirals through the air, illuminated like soft lanterns. Some pages show anatomical drawings. Others depict flying machines. Others map rivers, mountains, or mechanical gears. All of them drift gracefully, like leaves obeying a quiet choreography. Leonardo walks through the floating papers, touching none of them. They call them codices now, he says softly. The Codex Atlanticus, the Codex Leicester, the Codex Arundel. He lifts his gaze. Pieces of me scattered across the world. Your eccentric curiosity moment emerges here. The Codex Leicester, one of Leonardo's notebooks, was purchased centuries later by Bill Gates for over $30 million, the most ever paid for a manuscript. He had high-resolution copies made available to the public. A strange twist of history. a Renaissance mind preserved through modern technology. Leonardo smiles faintly. I would like to have met him, he says, amused. A man interested in ideas. The pages drift and swirl around you, rotating slowly, gentle as snowfall. Leonardo lifts one page gently from the air without touching it, simply watching the way it turns. People believe genius is lightning, he says, but genius is the wind. It moves slowly, reshaping things piece by piece. He steps aside, and the pages glide back into their drifting pattern. Then he walks toward a tall column of pages clustered together. These pages pulse with a faint golden glow. He touches the air near them. Scholars argue, he whispers, about whether my notebooks reveal a unified philosophy or only fragments. There is your academic debate moment. Even today, experts disagree whether Leonardo had a central guiding worldview or simply explored curiosity wherever it led. Some see his notebooks as chaotic brilliance. Others see a hidden coherence still not fully understood. Leonardo turns to you. What do you think? You begin to answer, but he raises a hand gently. You do not need to say. He steps deeper into the hall of drifting pages. Each footstep echoes softly, as though time itself listens. I wrote of machines, he says, of rivers, of flight, of anatomy, of light. He pauses. But all of them, all were attempts to understand one question. He looks at you. How does the world move? He lifts both hands, palms open. The body moves. Light moves. Water moves. Time moves. Ideas move. He lowers his hands slowly. Everything breathes. The pages swirl more quickly now, orbiting him like planets around sun. Their faint glow illuminates his face, softening the lines of age. He closes his eyes for a long moment. I dreamed, he whispers, of gathering all knowledge into a single book. He opens his eyes again, but I could not. He watches the drifting papers with gentle acceptance. So instead, he murmurs, the world became the book. The pages slow their orbit. One by one, they return to the darkness beyond the archway, quietly drifting back into whatever realms of history they belong to. Soon, the garden reappears, soft, still, moonlit. Leonardo stands with you beneath the cypress tree again. I am no longer scattered, he says quietly. That is enough. He turns toward you. I have one last thing to show you. He begins walking toward a narrow passage between the gardens and the stone wall of Clos Luce. The final chapter, he whispers, not in ink, but in memory. And as you follow him into the soft darkness, you sense that everything you've witnessed, every machine, every sketch, every dream, has been preparing you for the quiet truth waiting ahead. Leonardo leads you through the narrow passage that winds between the outer wall of Clos Luce and the garden hedges. The night has deepened into a soft blue hush. No owls now, no rustling fountains, just the gentle rhythm of your steps on the gravel path. It feels as though the world has slowed its breathing. At the far end of the passage, a small wooden gate waits beneath a flowering arch. Leonardo pauses there, resting his hand on the latch. This, he whispers, is the last place. He opens the gate. Beyond it lies a small courtyard, quiet, private, enclosed by warm stone walls. The moonlight fills it softly, casting delicate shadows across the cobblestones. A bench rests against one wall. A small tree stands in the center, its leaves stirring with the gentlest breeze. He steps inside. You follow. Leonardo sits on the bench, his posture calm, serene, almost weightless. He gestures for you to sit beside him. When you do, he exhales a soft, quiet release that seems to drift upward like smoke. For all the years I lived, he murmurs, I learned one thing most clearly. He rests his hands loosely on his knees. The world, he continues, is made of movement. But peace comes from stillness. The leaves of the small tree shimmer faintly. Its branches sway with barely perceptible motion. Here, Leonardo says, I used to sit in the evenings. I would listen to the air, to the stones, to the way shadows gather. You let the silence settle. He closes his eyes, listening to something ancient and quiet. People imagine, he says softly, that genius is thunder. But thunder is the end of something. He opens his eyes again, calm, luminous. Genius is the listening before the storm. He stands and walks slowly toward a low wooden table you hadn't noticed before. Upon it rests a small clay oil lamp, its flame flickering gently, casting trembling shadows across the courtyard wall. This lamp, he whispers, was the last thing I lit each night. He picks it up carefully. When the world was too loud, I would sit here and study the flame. He tilts the lamp slightly. See how it wavers? How it leans? How it speaks without sound? He sets the lamp down. A historical fact drifts softly into the moment. Leonardo spent his final years at Clos Luce under the care and friendship of King Francis I, passing away in 1519. Tradition holds, though perhaps romantically, that the king was present at his bedside. Whether literal or symbolic, the closeness between them shaped Leonardo's gentle final chapter. Leonardo's gaze softens. I left the world quietly, he says. No noise, no proclamation. He moves toward the courtyard's far wall, where a small vine climbs and spirals. People think, he says gently, that greatness must be loud. He shakes his head. No, greatness is a whisper. He touches the vine with 2 fingers, as though acknowledging its delicate persistence. Your eccentric curiosity moment emerges now. Accounts claim Leonardo's final words included concerns about whether he had offended God and man by not completing enough of his works. Whether true or exaggerated, the sentiment reflects his lifelong desire for mastery and humility. Leonardo returns to the bench and sits once more. I did not finish everything, he says softly. No one finishes everything. He tilts his head, listening to the faint wind. But the beauty, he continues, lies in wanting to understand. He looks at you with a quiet smile. You have walked with me through machines, through maps, through sketches and illusions, through sorrows and wings and battles. He folds his hands, and now we stand at the last door. Behind him, in a recessed corner of the courtyard, a small wooden door blends into the stone. He nods toward it. That door, he whispers, leads to the room where I took my final breath. The air grows still. Not heavy, just still. Leonardo rises slowly, every motion unhurried. Come, he says. I will show you, but only a little. He walks toward the door. You follow, feeling the hush deepen with each step. Leonardo rests his hand on the wooden surface. He doesn't open it. Instead, he closes his eyes again. You do not need to step inside, he murmurs. Some rooms must remain quiet. He turns slightly, so you can see his profile, lined by moonlight, serene as a sculpture. I want you to remember something, he says. One truth that matters more than all machines and inventions. He opens his eyes. The greatest creation you will ever shape, he whispers, is the peace you carry into the world. He steps back from the door, and the gentleness with which you move through it. The courtyard seems to glow faintly now. Moonlight on stone, firefly glimmers at the edges, shadows that breathe but do not intrude. Leonardo takes a slow step toward you. I leave you, he says softly, not at an ending, but at a beginning. He gestures toward the courtyard gate, the path you came from. Tonight, you carry my pages with you, not on parchment, but in memory. He places his palm lightly over his chest. In memory, he whispers, is the truest form of preservation. He takes one final breath, gentle, steady, complete. You have walked the long path, he says. And now, his voice softens until it's almost a sigh. You may rest. The courtyard dims. Your breathing slows. The night folds inward like a blanket. Leonardo stands beside you one last time. Calm, present, eternal. Sleep, he whispers, is the door we all enter. A pause, and beyond it, dreams. He steps back, slowly dissolving into the soft blue darkness. The tree rustles once more. The oil lamp flickers, and the night settles around you like warm silk. Hey, before you settle completely, just take one long, quiet breath with me. In through the nose, and out letting everything soften just a little more. You've walked a long road tonight, through workshops humming with invention, gardens touched by moonlight, rooms filled with sketches, and corridors where centuries seemed to drift like dust in a warm sunbeam. And after all those steps, after all those gentle discoveries, you finally reached the quiet place where even Leonardo rested, a place where curiosity dissolves into calm, and where thought eases into something softer, slower, and deeply peaceful. Now you're here too. Let the world become still around you. Let the last bits of tension melt from your jaw, from your shoulders, from a space behind your eyes. There's nothing left to do, and nowhere left to go. Every invention, every idea, every dream you followed tonight can settle like dust in a sunlit room, drifting down, slow and silent, finding a place to rest. You are safe. You are warm. You have walked far enough for one night. Just imagine the soft glow of that little oil lamp again, its flame flickering gently, inviting you to surrender to the darkness. The same way Leonardo did at the end of each long day. Nothing rushed, nothing demanded, only a quiet invitation to let go. So close your eyes, feel your breath becoming slower and heavier, and allow your whole body to sink into the mattress, as if sleep itself were a warm blanket wrapping around you. You've earned this rest. You're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, just drift. Sweet dreams.